Chapter 53-36. Seeing this woman insulting the princess, some of the commoners at the entrance of the jewelry store could not help but scold her angrily. "What did you say? How dare you insult the princess like this? You should catch her and drown her in a pig cage. Evil woman." Third Fu was so angry that he waved his sleeve and slapped Bao Cuiping hard. Ah! Bao Cuiping's body swayed and she was about to fall to the ground when fourth young master Fu quickly pulled her into his arms. Third Fu did not hold back at all in this slap. The slap made Bao Cuiping's ears ring and her vision blur. She felt dizzy. She heard the angry and cold voice of the person she liked. "Are you crazy? Don't call me that so intimately. Who is your cousin?" "My mother passed away many years ago. My maternal family is a famous scholarly family in Qingzhou. Both of my uncles are currently stationed outside the country. I don't remember that the surname of their daughters is Bao. My cousins are all well educated and come from famous families. Don't smear and insult their reputation outside." Third young master Fu roared angrily. "Also, you said that we are childhood sweethearts and innocent playmates. You made that up. We have only met a few times and each time, we only saw each other from afar at banquets. I have never spoken to you from the beginning to the end. How can we be childhood sweethearts and innocent playmates? Are you crazy? If you like to fantasize so much, why don't you go and draw pictures to satisfy your hunger? I am warning you, don't talk nonsense in front of my wife again. Otherwise, I will not let you off." Third young master Fu's eyes were cold. The consequences are not something you can bear. He must have had 8 lifetimes of bad luck. Previously, he had been worried that it would not be good if the girl's reputation was ruined. He did not care about some messy rumors. Anyway, he was a man and did not care so much about his reputation, so he did not want to defend himself. But now, this shameless woman was talking nonsense in front of his Shuang. He could not let Shuang misunderstand. Only then did he realize that he couldn't have the slightest bit of pity for shameless people. Otherwise, he would be the only one suffering. Everyone looked at the pale Miss Bao in confusion, and then at the exasperated third young master Fu. Third young master's eyes were clearly saying, "Please don't fall for me again, okay? What do you see in me? Tell me, can't I change?" This was completely a case of the heartless flowing brook. This Miss Bao was truly an honest person. She had set her heart on third young master Fu and was trying all sorts of ways to be with him. However, in the young master's heart, there was not a single bit of her. At this moment, the young crown prince consort spread her hands and said, "Let them get married tomorrow." Since it was true love, the two of them also had each other in their hearts. Imperial Mother could be considered to have facilitated a good thing. A long delay would lead to many dreams. She wanted them to get married quickly. I don't want this fourth young master of the Fu family to think about his cousin and go out to fool around with other innocent girls. It's really not good. The daughters of the prestigious families in the capital cannot suffer this. They can't marry into Marquis Ning's mansion for nothing and be a decoration. They can't just watch their husband and cousin being lovey-dovey every day. The little crown princess spoke in a serious manner, but Prince Mo's lips could not help but twitch. No, the more he looked at his wife's expressionless and serious face, the more adorable she was. Chapter 53-37. Her small appearance seemed to have struck his heart, causing him to be unable to tear his eyes away for some reason. When the madams and young misses present heard this, they were also extremely moved and grateful. They nodded repeatedly and said, "The crown princess is indeed thoughtful. Since this fourth young master Fu has already expressed his true love like this, then we should facilitate their good deed as soon as possible." Right, the crown princess is extremely right. Miss Yang bowed gratefully at the crown princess. We are all extremely grateful that the crown princess has worked so hard for our capital's young misses. Bao Zuiping was flabbergasted and swayed unsteadily. The young crown princess spoke again, "Why aren't you quickly carrying Miss Bao back to the estate? Look at her, she can't even stand properly after several tries. So pitiful." The little stoic shook her head and clicked her tongue. "It's probably because she wasn't nourished in her mother's womb when she was young. That's why her cerebellum developed unevenly when she grew up. She even staggered a bit when she walked. Quickly carry her back. She really has to take good care of her body, or else it really will be especially difficult for her to give birth in the future. Even if she can barely give birth, it might also be sigh. She'll end up with a lifetime of illnesses. Women really have to treat themselves especially well. Miss Bao, you have to pay attention and take care of your body. Everyone, you're truly vicious." Saying such things, these words would definitely spread to every nook and cranny of the capital tomorrow. Everyone would know that this Miss Bao was malnourished since she was young and that her body was frail when she grew up, so it would be especially difficult for her to give birth. It seemed like the crown princess had already reminded Miss Bao to take good care of her body more than once. What kind of person was the crown princess? She was a great pill master that everyone in the capital didn't know about. The crown princess's pill skills had spread throughout the 3 provinces. She could even revive Her Majesty the Empress, who had been frozen in ice for so many years. As one could well imagine, the crown princess's iron-mouthed words were definitely true. The madams present all sighed when they heard this and thought that it was fortunate that they had excluded the Bao family from the start when they were choosing daughters-in-law. Especially since Bao Zuiping, after third young Master Fu's reputation all these years, it didn't sound too good. Not many madams from wealthy families would take a fancy to her. Fortunately, he didn't take a fancy to her. Otherwise, wouldn't he be in big trouble if he married such a congenitally stunted woman? Bao Zuiping was lifted up by 2 strong maidservants who came out from behind the crown princess. His face turned pale on the spot, and he fainted while foaming at the mouth. When everyone saw that he had really fainted, they were even more convinced of the little crown princess's irrefutable words. A madam shook her head and sighed inwardly. With a body like this, how can he help manage the household affairs of Marquis Ning Manor in the future? That's right, I'm really worried about the second madam of Marquis Ning's estate. She picked a daughter-in-law and finally chose her own niece. I'm still not feeling well. The crowd followed the commotion outside and watched as Bao Zuiping was carried back to Changningho estate by 2 servant girls. Although 4th young Master Fu was unwilling, he was also sent back. At night, the Empress's imperial edict came down. She ordered that 4th young Master Fu of Marquis Ning Manor and Miss Zuiping of the Bao family to get married the next day without further delay. As if struck by lightning, Madame Bao fainted on the spot when she received the imperial edict. Miss Bao cried the entire night. The next day, without any preparation, she braced herself and was escorted into the bridal sedan chair. She cried and wailed as she walked around the city, attracting a lot of attention. Chapter 53-38. In the end, Miss Bao was sent to Marquis Changningho's Fu, crying all the way. The commoners along the way all thought that something had happened. They even wondered if some poor family's young lady had been sent to ward off bad luck, and if her husband had died as soon as she entered the door. In the midst of this gossip, 4th young Master Fu and Miss Bao were sent to be a couple while it was still hot. All the madams in the capital applauded and cheered. Everyone said, 4th young Master Fu swore in public that he would love and protect Miss Bao for the rest of his life. The Empress was so touched that she immediately appointed a marriage between the 2 of them. They came the next day and got married. This matter inexplicably became a popular story, and everyone was talking about the drama between 4th young Master Fu and Miss Bao during their leisure time. There were also some busybodies who made this story into a play and put it on the stage, but this was all in the future. At this moment, the little crown princess was holding a bowl of holy rice porridge in her hands and looking at the eloquent and gesticulating Kai Chi in astonishment. She was stunned for a long time before she asked, "Is it true?" "Crown Princess, you didn't see it. What this servant said is all true." Kai Chi said with exultation, "Early this morning, when Miss Bao went to offer tea to her aunt, she accidentally knocked over the teacup. This made Marquis Chong Ningho's wife very angry. Her aunt passed down a message on the spot, demoting Miss Bao to second madam, saying that she will be demoted to fourth young master's co-wife." The little crown princess couldn't help but be speechless. This Marquis Chong Ningho's fu was full of weirdos, big and small. How could they do this? They got married yesterday and demoted her to a co-wife today. Marquis Chong Ningho's wife also said that if Miss Bao can't give birth to a son for the fu within a year, she will demote Miss Bao to a concubine. It seems that Marquis Chong Ningho's wife heard the rumors and thought that her niece's body was weak and couldn't bear a child. I reckon that it won't be long before fourth young master Fu takes a wife. The little crown princess stood there in a daze, holding the bowl. It was a long time before she found her voice. Then what about her husband? Won't her husband object? Husband? Oh, it's that fourth young master of Marquis Ning's mansion, right? I didn't hear what he did. Kai Chi curled her lips and said, "It should be a tacit admission." The little crown princess was stunned. She held the bowl and stared blankly for a while. But didn't he claim that his true feelings for Miss Bao would never change in this lifetime? Didn't he say that he yearned for Miss Bao and would treat her well for the rest of his life? Crown Prince Mo happened to enter the room at this time, and when he heard this, he quickly strode forward with a grin and took the bowl from his wife's hand. He bent down and tapped her small nose. "What do you think? Not everyone is like your husband, me. People like me who can say and do it are really rare in this world." As he spoke, he was still immensely pleased with himself. The little stoic glanced at him. Humph. This guy was really shameless. Not only did he praise himself, but he also knew how to show off. "Your Highness." As he spoke, Xiao Yi suddenly poked his head out the window. The night pavilion found out where that Hall Master Mu is. Prince Mo narrowed his eyes. He held Jojo's hand and turned to look at him. "Did you keep an eye on him?" "Yes." Xiao Yi nodded. "Your Highness and the Crown Princess can go over and take a look at any time." Mo Lien turned to look at his expressionless wife and held her small hand, asking, "Jojo, are we going now?" Arbor nodded slightly. "Yes." Chapter 53-39. The two of them quickly teleported to Changle Courtyard through the array disk of the Great City Protection Array. They stood at the entrance of the small courtyard and looked inside. The courtyard was in a mess, as if someone had rummaged through it several times. Xiao Yi followed behind the two of them and said in a low voice, "At first, Hall Master Mu was not here. This subordinate found that she was moved here before dawn this morning. This subordinate felt that this matter was a little strange, so I sent people to secretly keep an eye on this place." Arbor raised her slender eyebrows. "Someone deliberately threw her here?" Xiao Yi nodded with certainty. "Yes. Crown Princess, at first, this subordinate thought that this heavenly fate might be up to something again. However, after staring at it for nearly 4 hours, the courtyard remained calm and tranquil, without a single ripple. It seems that this subordinate is overthinking." Arbor nodded. "Where is she?" Xiao Yi hurriedly said, "That young lady also went in not long ago. This subordinate asked our people to hide in the dark and did not stop her. Although I don't know why she is here, her face is extremely haggard." Arbor stopped in her tracks and whispered with a frown, "Mu Xiaoxue." Xiao Yi nodded vigorously. Arbor and Mo Lien looked at each other. Did Mu Xiaoxue also rush over to see her after hearing the news about her mother? It seemed that this daughter of hers was also considerate. Arbor gestured for Xiao Yi to lead the way. She and Mo Lien followed Xiao Yi to the small backyard unhurriedly. Xiao Yi pointed at the narrow and dark woodshed not far away and said softly, "That Miss Mu is inside now." Arbor grunted and pulled off the thick cloak wrapped around her body. Her small ears twitched slightly. Are they arguing? She seemed to have heard the sound of an argument drifting over with the wind from the woodshed. Yes. Mo Lien nodded affirmatively. Let's go closer and take a look. Of course, Arbor readily agreed. She also wanted to see what the mother and daughter were up to. What was there to argue about at a time like this? At such a critical juncture, shouldn't they be more united and seek a way out together? Why did it seem like they were fighting each other? The two of them quietly floated over and removed the barrier created by the soundproof talisman without anyone noticing. No wonder the voice sounded faintly indistinct just now. It turned out that this Mu Xiaoxue was quite careful and deliberately made a soundproof talisman here. Once the barrier was removed, Mu Xiaoxue's ear-piercing screams fell into everyone's ears. I'm not you. You're so unlucky that you might not be able to break through the triple transformation in your lifetime. I will definitely be able to complete these 3 modifications. Each one will be more perfect than the last. Slap. Xiao Mu pulled Mo Lien closer. Through a small, low window, they just so happened to see a thin woman raising a trembling hand, seemingly using all the strength in her body to slap Mu Xiaoxue in the face with all her might. Xiaoxue when Arbor saw Mu Qingya again, she couldn't help but be a little startled. She didn't expect that after not seeing her for a while, Mu Qingya had lost so much weight that she couldn't recognize her at all. Arbor narrowed her eyes and carefully sized up Mu Qingya. Mu Xiaoxue seemed to have completely angered her. She was trembling all over and couldn't breathe properly. Chapter 5340. Mu Qingya's transformation couldn't be described as small. Even Arbor was shocked to see her through the window. It would have been fine if Mu Qingya had only lost a bit of weight. Her current appearance was completely skinny and out of shape. Her entire body was shriveled, as if she had lost all the moisture in her body. She looked like a walking corpse. Her hair was yellow and withered, hanging from her scalp in clumps. Her hands and feet were so shriveled that only bones were left, as if they would break at any moment. This woman was nowhere near the gentle, refined, and radiant appearance she remembered. Her eyes were lifeless and sunken, and her entire face had shrunk to the size of half a palm. She opened her mouth and wanted to speak, but was completely interrupted by Mu Xiaoxue's scolding. Mu Xiaoxue was like a madwoman, her hands moving up and down as she yelled, "Do you think I'm like you? I won't be like you. I just want to succeed in all 3 transformations. I can become the most perfect person in the world. And the patriarch has promised me. As long as I work hard for him in the future, he won't treat me badly. Even if I can't, I still have the universe reversal talisman to help me. I'll be fine, I still have a chance." Mu Qingya's sunken eyes were like full moons as she stared at her foolish daughter in front of her. Hot tears could not be stopped from falling inch by inch from those dried-up eyes. Mu Qingya reached out and hammered the ground with all her might. The sound coming from her throat was rough and full of sorrow, as if a carriage had run over her a dozen times. It's me, I've protected you too well. So you're actually so naive." Looking at her foolish daughter, Mu Qingya couldn't help but burst into tears. She had been in Tianyun for so many years, so she knew better than anyone the nature of the higher-ups. When they saw that you were useful to them, they would use some small benefits to tempt you. Once you lost any bit of value, you would die more miserably than anyone else. She knew this just by looking at her. She used her identity as the Hall Master of the Soaring Heavens Hall to blend in with the Talisman aristocratic family. She often helped them secretly gather supplies and deliver news in the capital. The organization treated her so well and put her in such important positions. However, once her identity was exposed and she was defeated or even forced to flee, her future opportunities would plummet. Tian Yun does not need useless people to occupy resources. Moreover, she was just an ordinary person who didn't know anything. In the eyes of the upper echelons of Tian Yun, she had already lost her value and was no longer worth them investing in her. That was why she ended up like this. If it weren't for the fact that the organization still wanted to investigate the second drug reaction in her body, they probably wouldn't have gone to Snow Island to rescue her. Hate. Of course she hated him. Mu Qingya's life had turned out like this. Regret? She couldn't explain it clearly. There should be some, but if she hadn't joined Tian Yun, then she would have been an ordinary housewife for the rest of her life. She spent all her time with her parents-in-law and husband. She was just an ordinary woman in the inner courtyard. Naturally, she was even more unwilling to accept such a life. Mother, what are you saying? Not only are you not happy for me, you're even cursing me now. Mu Xiaoxue yelled. Do you think your daughter will be as unlucky as you? Chapter 53-41. Impossible, I'm telling you. That's impossible. Daughter will never be like you, mother. Daughter wasn't ruthless enough and didn't act ruthlessly enough. That's why you were trampled underfoot by that damn bitch. Daughter won't. Daughter has a way to deal with her right now. Family head said that as long as daughter successfully completes 2 body modifications, he will give me the universe reversal talisman. At that time, daughter's talent will skyrocket. Ha, ha 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 ha. Mu Xiaoxue laughed maniacally. Mother, daughter will accomplish what you can't accomplish in your lifetime. Oh, Xiaoxue. Mu Qingya cried until her entire body trembled. Her sunken eyes stared at her daughter in disbelief. You can't beat her, Mu Qingya said shakily. Even she had been defeated by that little stoic, and she had been defeated so miserably. She understood her daughter very well. She definitely couldn't win against that little girl who was as cunning as a fox, bold, and ruthless. Shut up. Mu Xiaoxue roared at Mu Qingya sternly. She pounded her chest with one hand and screamed at the top of her lungs, You're looking down on me. You're looking down on a normal person like me for being able to turn the tables, right? Let me tell you, mother, I'm Mu Xiaoxue. I'm different from you. She waved her hand vigorously and roared neurotically. Family head has already promised me. Mu Xiaoxue tilted her head, and her eyes also moved dully. She opened her mouth wide and gasped for breath. An abnormal silly smile appeared on her face. Mother, I will succeed. She patted her chest hard, pounding it again and again, but her body didn't feel any pain. It was as if he wasn't hammering his own body, but an ordinary piece of wood. Let me tell you, I'm not as stupid as you. Look at yourself. You're already so old, but in the end, what do you have, huh? Instead of being Madame Mu, you've become like this, neither human nor ghost. The Mu family expelled you, and the organization doesn't like you. You're nothing. Xiao Shui. Mu Qingya opened her mouth and allowed her tears, snot, and saliva to flow all over her face. All she could see was Mu Xiaoxue's arrogant and insufferably arrogant face. You will regret it, daughter. You will regret it. I won't. Mu Xiaoxue yelled angrily. My legs were broken back then. Where were you? If I didn't accept the transformation to save myself, would I still be standing in front of you now? I will be like a beggar, like a tramp. I will be as dirty and smelly as you. I won't even have the right to stand up. Me, Mu Xiaoxue, will definitely become the most talented person in the world. Everything that woman has now will be mine in the future. Her divine realm cultivation, her holy wood, holy water, and her spirit domain. Ha ha ha. It's all mine, mother. Ha, it's all mine, mother. Do you know? I'm so happy now. Mu Xiaoxue burst into a series of crazy laughter. His entire body was like a strange branch that was shaking in the wind, as crazy as a lunatic. Xiao Yi was so angry that he pressed the sword at his waist, but was stopped by a look from Sir Jojo. Arbor raised his hand and gently patted Mo Lian's cold hand. Chapter 53-42. Sir Jojo comforted his infuriated husband and secretly transmitted his voice to the two of them, "Don't bother with this idiot. Let her continue to wander in her own spiritual world. Just continue to watch the show." The universe reversal charm. Arbor couldn't help but laugh coldly. That would depend on whether she had the fate and luck to open the talisman. Mu Qingya stared dumbfoundedly at her daughter who was acting like a lunatic. She sighed repeatedly and sobbed, Xiao Shui, wake up. You can't beat her. Can you stop? Mother doesn't want you to be rich or have a meteoric rise. Mother just wants you to live well. Xiao Shui, listen to mother's advice. Stop. Shut up. Mu Xiaoxue shouted, startling Arbor and the others who were hiding outside the door. Her voice was so sharp that it was unbearable. Her eyes were bloodshot as she stared sharply at the dying Mu Qingya in front of her and said word by word, Mother, do you know how much I hate you? Arbor couldn't see Mu Xiaoxue's expression through the window, but he could clearly see that Mu Qingya's eyes were filled with shock as she stared blankly at her daughter. It was as if she had never understood this daughter of hers and only now realized her true colors. I really hate you to death. Xiao Shui. Mu Qingya's voice trembled and her face was filled with disbelief as she stared blankly at her daughter. Xiao Shui, shut up, don't talk. Mu Xiaoxue roared hysterically. My entire life has been ruined by you. It's all your fault, all your fault. It's fine that you're unlucky to be an ordinary person without any cultivation. But you still have the face to be my mother. You harmed me like this. You caused me to be unable to activate my mystic meridians and cultivate the right path. You caused your own daughter to be an ordinary person who can only struggle at death's door and rely on others for the rest of her life. How can you be at peace with yourself? How can you face me like this? Mu Xiaoxue screamed and pointed crazily at Mu Qingya who was lying in the corner. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. If my mother was like the other madams, had cultivation and talent, and was as strong as Long Chuyun, would I have become like this today? Do I need to be jealous of others? Do I need to compromise and beg my grandparents for a universe reversal talisman that can change my talent? Mu Qingya, this is all your fault. If you weren't so useless, would I have ended up in such a miserable state because of you? Mu Xiaoxue shrieked, her eyes filled with twisted hatred and anger. I hate you to death, I hate you to death. Mu Qingya was dumbfounded. She stared blankly at her daughter, whom she had doted on since she was a child, and could not bear to let her suffer any grievances. She felt dizzy and her empty eyes stared at her daughter who looked like a complete stranger. Mu Qingya's body was like a dried-up piece of wood. Not a single drop of water could be squeezed out. She couldn't even shed a single tear. She felt as if someone had punched a hole in her heart. A gust of cold wind was blowing in from the outside. Her daughter hated her. Her daughter actually hated her so much. She hated her. How ironic was this? Chapter 53-43. Everything she did was for this daughter of hers. She wholeheartedly wanted her daughter to be well, but in the end, she received her daughter's disregard for her own family. Hate her, her daughter said she hated her. Mu Qingya's body had long stopped feeling cold, but at this moment, it was as if her heart had been frozen 3 feet deep and sunk into a bottomless abyss. Her mind buzzed involuntarily, and her nostrils flared as she huffed and puffed, as if it was difficult for her to even breathe. Clap, clap, clap. Suddenly, several crisp claps sounded outside the woodshed. The mother and daughter duo who were in the middle of a confrontation stiffened at the same time, and they stiffly turned their heads to look at the door. They saw a pregnant woman dressed in rippling red clothes expressionlessly clapping her hands as she coolly watched the mother and daughter duo. A handsome and otherworldly man dressed in brocade was supporting her as they strode into the narrow and dark woodshed together. The mother and daughter duo were momentarily dazzled by the myriad rays of light. They only felt that when this pair of jade paragons walked in, even this gloomy and cramped woodshed seemed much brighter than before. Splendid, splendid. The little stoic nodded and praised in all seriousness. Today's show was worth watching. This kind of mother and daughter falling out and the daughter directly rebuking the mother was truly a once-in-a-lifetime scene. Mu Qingya shuddered and tried to crawl up with difficulty, but because she had completely lost her strength, she fell heavily again. Her head leaned against the stiff pile of firewood behind her, and a trace of fear and sorrow slid through her eyes. She knew very well that her and her daughter's lives would most likely be forfeit after falling into the hands of this pair of fiends. Mu Qingya, does it hurt? The little stoic suddenly tilted her head and asked. Mu Qingya shuddered and stared at her in horror. She raised her trembling finger and pointed at Arbor as she stammered, You. Arbor suddenly smiled at her, and his gaze seemed to imperceptibly sweep past Mu Xiaoxue. Mu Xiaoxue's back was facing him earlier, so he didn't see her expression. Now that he saw it, Arbor couldn't help but be secretly speechless. It turned out that when a person's mind was twisted, it would affect her charming face that was like a little white flower. Mu Xiaoxue's face seemed a lot rougher than before. Of course, this was closely related to her life of fear and trepidation during this period of time. But at this moment, Mu Xiaoxue's face was so contorted that it was almost deformed. Her pair of eyes were twisted into triangles. How interesting. Arbor ignored Mu Qingya and glanced coldly at Mu Xiaoxue. What are you doing? Mu Xiaoxue's eyes widened in horror as she took a few steps back. When he turned around, he saw more than 10 black-clothed shadow guards swarming to the door, blocking the door of the woodshed. She simply could not escape. Her palms were covered in cold sweat, and her hands and feet were trembling as she stood there. Weren't you talking nonsense just now? Xiao Yi sneered and scolded angrily, Miss Mu, you're quite capable. Could it be that the heaven and earth reversal charm you spoke of really has such a great effect? With a single talisman, you can transfer the talent, and luck of others to yourself? No, it's not. Mu Qingya's entire body trembled as she shouted harshly, It's not. Crown Princess, Your Highness the Crown Prince. This is all the nonsense of a child. Chapter 53-44. It's not true, Crown Princess, Your Highness, it's not true. There's no such talisman in the world that this child is talking nonsense about. I do. Xiao Mu smiled faintly, her voice gentle. What? Mu Qingya's heart tightened and she couldn't help but tremble a few times. There's such a talisman in the world. Arbor looked at the mother and daughter expressionlessly and said coldly, Is this how you draw the heaven and earth twist? As she spoke, she casually raised her hand and swiped it. Her hand moved very quickly and a talisman flashing with purple light appeared in the air in a matter of minutes. She reached out and pushed the talisman. The curse seal slammed into Mu Xiaoxue's body with a bang, causing her to fall backwards. She threw her head back and smashed into the wall with a thump and spat out a mouthful of blood. Arbor curled his lips and a mocking look flashed through his eyes. Hurry up and exchange with me. Talent, cultivation, everything is at your fingertips. Ah! Mu Xiaoxue lunged forward crazily and looked like she was going to fight Arbor to the death. A harsh glint flashed past Crown Prince Mo's eyes, and he directly kicked this woman to the side. Disgusting thing. Mu Xiaoxue's body trembled and she couldn't help but tremble. Why? Why was she still so pitiful? Why? Mu Xiaoxue glared at Mo Lian and Arbor from the corner of her eyes. Her heart was burning with anger. She kept telling herself in her heart, why are they looking down on me? Why? It wasn't the first time that this high and mighty crown prince had glanced at her with such a cold gaze. She clearly was not the least bit inferior to Xiao Mu. Why is it that in everyone's eyes, Arbor is like the stars in the sky and I'm just a pile of mud under their feet? One day, I'll change my fate. One day, I'll let everyone know that I, Mu Xiaoxue, am not a piece of trash. I'm a woman that everyone will applaud. And that crown prince, I've changed my mind. I'll find a way to seduce him and make him fall in love with me without hesitation. Then, I'll kick him away. Slap. Slap. Arbor slapped Mu Xiaoxue's mouth twice and completely stopped the unrealistic thoughts in her mind. Her entire body shuddered as she fearfully met Xiao Mu's icy gaze. If you look at your husband like that again, I'll kill you right now. Arbor's cold and emotionless voice made Mu Xiaoxue's trembling heart fall into the depths of an ice lake. That's right, that's right. Right now, even her survival might be a big problem. Your Highness, Crown Princess. This matter has nothing to do with my daughter, Xiao Shui. I beg the two of you to be magnanimous and let go of my daughter. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Mu Qingya half crawled on the ground and wriggled her filthy and smelly body like a maggot, trying to get closer to Arbor. Crown Prince Emo pursed his lips and directly raised his hand, setting up a shielding barrier in front of the two people. It kept Mu Qingya outside and prevented her from taking half a step closer. Mu Qingya had no choice but to slap the barrier and cry out tearfully, Crown Prince Consort, just kill me. Just kill me. I know. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Chapter 53-45. I'm the one who harmed your mother, Long Chuyun. It's me, I'm the one who's petty and jealous of her talent. I schemed against her. I coveted her 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. It's all my fault. It has nothing to do with Xiao Shui. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. It's me. Please let my daughter go. She's innocent. Mu Qingya prostrated herself on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly. I'm willing to die. I'm willing to do anything. Please let her go. Let her go. She's younger than you. If your mother, Long Chuyun, was still alive, she definitely wouldn't have been implicated in this matter. Shut up. Arbor roared angrily. His black eyes were like the stars in the cold night sky, shooting out a cold light. What right do you have to mention her again? You still have the face to mention her. My mother is not someone you can mention. Don't let me hear you spit out those 3 words again. You don't have the right. Mu Qingya's body trembled. She nodded repeatedly and kowtowed again. I know. Crown Princess, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. It's all my wishful thinking. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done this, Crown Princess. The little Crown Princess looked at her coldly. The corners of her lips curled up coldly. Does it hurt? Mu Qingya looked at her in shock. This was the second time today that the Crown Princess had asked her if it hurt. This terrifying question made Mu Qingya's entire body turn cold. She could barely speak normally. However, Arbor didn't seem to want her to answer. He turned and waved at Mu Xiaoxue. Mu Xiaoxue, I'll give you a chance to live. Crawl out of here in 5 minutes. As long as you can get out of the door, I'll let you go. A trace of extreme grief and indignation flashed past Mu Xiaoxue's eyes. She glared at Arbor hatefully and opened her mouth. It seems like you don't need this chance. Just as Xiao Mu's frigid voice rang out, she heard Mu Qingya banging on the wall as she repeatedly shouted, No, that's not it, Crown Prince Consort. Xiao Shui is willing, she is willing. Mu Xiaoxue glared at Mu Qingya, and her resentment towards her mother rose to a new height. The humiliation she had suffered today was all because of her, because of this useless mother. She hated Mu Qingya to death. She hated everyone in the world to death. The little crown princess glanced at him coldly, and Xiao Yi unsheathed his sword without hesitation. No matter how furious Mu Xiaoxue was, she could not help but kneel down in front of the tip of the sword, even though she was in a rage. He fell to the ground with a plop, wailing loudly as he struggled to crawl forward. Arbor looked at her coldly. "You only have 5 minutes. Are you sure you want to waste it?" Mu Xiaoxue burst into tears, but with a little more strength, she crawled out of the woodshed. She didn't dare to look at the black-clothed shadow guards on both sides of the woodshed. Those people's expressions must be full of disdain. She didn't dare to look or even listen to anything. She could only grit her teeth and crawl forward with all her might. It took a while to walk from the woodshed to the door, not to mention that she was so angry that her hands and feet were trembling. She had to crawl all the way. Her fair palms rubbed against the ground, leaving streaks of blood. Mu Xiaoxue bit her lips so hard that they were bleeding. This kind of humiliation, this kind of torture, she, Mu Xiaoxue, would remember it deep in her heart. Chapter 53-46. Arbor, Arbor. One day, she, Mu Xiaoxue, would make her die a horrible death. Mu Qingya knelt on the ground and knocked on the wall in front of her, howling incoherently. "She's your cousin. Even if it's for the sake of the old man, you can't treat her like this. Mu Qiao, you're not human. You're not human. Do you have a heart? Do you have a heart?" Mu Qingya howled, the pain in her heart indescribable. She felt as if someone had stabbed her heart dozens of times with a sharp knife. Every stab was enough to kill her. She was in pain and sorrow, angry and helpless. She was as insignificant as a grain of sand in the dust. She could be trampled into the depths of the abyss. Mo Lien sneered. "Ha, you still have the cheek to ask Jojo if he has a heart. You schemed against her in the lower galaxy. You harmed her mother and didn't even let her go. Why didn't you let Jojo go for the sake of Grandpa? Why didn't you let Jojo go? Now that you've lost, you've suffered a crushing defeat, you're saying such things. Do you think anyone will pity you?" Mu Qingya lay on the ground in a daze. Yet Xiao Mu chuckled lightly as she gazed at her indifferently. "Mu Qingya, does it hurt?" Mu Qingya shuddered and looked at the girl in disbelief. This was the 3rd time she had asked her this question. Her deranged mind suddenly snapped back to reality, and her body started to tremble uncontrollably. "It's you. It's you. It's me." Arbor nodded. "It's me who destroyed your precious daughter's mind step by step and forced her to go to Tianyun and ask for the mutation pill from the higher-ups. It's me who made her feel the unjust fate in this world, the miserable life, and the hopeless future. It's also me who destroyed her will bit by bit. Look, she hates you so much now. Wow, you're so hateful to your own daughter whom you've raised single-handedly. Pointing and scolding so irrationally." Xiao Mu stroked her chest. "It hurts a lot here, right? You must be in so much pain that you wish you were dead. I really want to die right now." She pursed her lips and smiled. She probably couldn't remember how many times she had laughed today. However, her smile remained at the corner of her mouth and did not reach the depths of her eyes. "Mu Qingya, Hall Master Mu. My good stepmother, do you understand now? You know how my mother felt at that time. That feeling of being despised by everyone, having no brothers, no friends, no lover, and not even being able to protect your children. That terrifying feeling, right?" "Huh." Arbor suddenly laughed out loud. "Do you like it? Do you like being treated like this?" Arbor tilted his head and asked innocently, my mother also experienced this feeling. When she's in the sky, she can't protect me. I could only watch as you turned me into a test subject and manipulated me like a marionette for the rest of my life. Let me think, my mother's heartache at that time should be the same as what you're feeling now. So I want you to feel what it's like to be unable to breathe from heartache. Is it fun? Mu Qingya's whole body trembled and her breathing quickened as she stared at him blankly. Devil. Chapter 53-47. Mu Qingya's expression was full of shock and fear. Her eyes were wide open as she stared at Arbor. Her mouth opened and closed, but she couldn't make a sound for a long time. After a long time. Only then did Mu Qingya hysterically roar at Xiao Mu. Devil! You're a devil! Was she crazy? How could she scheme against her innocent and pitiful daughter like this? What did Xiao Shui do wrong to deserve such treatment? The beautiful and expressionless girl in front of her was a devil, a devil. She didn't expect her to be a transmigrated woman with an innate advantage. With such a rich life experience and all kinds of skills, she was actually defeated by a malicious spirit that crawled out of hell. Mu Qingya couldn't accept it. She couldn't accept it. She couldn't accept it. She lingered on for so long not to see Xiao Shui suffer like this, not to see her daughter suffer like this. She had been fighting with the heavens, fighting with her own fate. In the end, what did she gain? You schemed against her. Why? Mu Qingya pounded her chest in grief, revealing a heartbroken expression. She's only 16, and she's your cousin. She's deeply related to you by blood. Do you have a conscience for scheming against your own cousin like this? Don't you feel a trace of shame or regret? It's all your fault, Arbor said expressionlessly. Looking at Mu Qingya, who was pounding the ground in front of the barrier, a faint trace of coldness appeared at the corner of his mouth. If I didn't do this, how could I see your heartbroken expression right now? Arbor looked at her indifferently. She had seen enough of the drama, and she didn't want to see Mu Qingya ever again. Can't you just come at me? Why did you scheme against a little girl like her? She's innocent. Mu Qingya pounded the barrier in front of her, trembling as she yelled. She was now in a state of madness. Her whole body was trembling, and her teeth were chattering. Innocent? Xiao Mu couldn't help but look at her in amusement. None of Tian Yun's minions are innocent. That was because you forced her to join Tian Yun. She has no other path to take, so she can only join them. Mu Qingya pointed at Xiao Mu with a trembling finger. She screamed at the top of her lungs, "What do you want in order for you to let her go? What will it take for you to let her live?" Arbor stared at her coldly. Do you think Mu Xiaoshui can still survive? His words were like a bucket of ice water, drenching Mu Qingya from head to toe, and a chill spread from the bottom of her heart. Fear and panic were not enough to describe her current feelings. Mu Qingya pounced on the barrier like a madwoman, banging her head against the transparent barrier as she shouted, Mu Qiao, let her go. I beg you, let her go. Whatever you have, come at me. Come at me. Arbor smiled coldly at her, and there was a trace of coldness in his voice. How did you control my fate back then? How did you make a fool of me? Now, I'll return it to your daughter. It's very fair, isn't it? Let her, let you, and let both of you have a taste of that pain and despair. Let's go through a life of being controlled again. Chapter 53-48. You can open your eyes wide and see how your precious daughter will end up miserably in the end. When your daughter has experienced all this misfortune, Qingya will be dead. Mu Qingya. The debt between us from 2 lifetimes will be considered settled. In the next life, you won't know me, and I won't know you. If you don't look for me, I won't look for you. It's very fair. As soon as Arbor finished speaking, Mu Qingya's entire body turned cold and she collapsed to the ground. She couldn't believe her ears. How terrifying was Arbor. He actually took revenge on her innocent and pitiful daughter. Don't worry, she won't die for the time being. Arbor tilted his head, a cold glint in his eyes as he stared deeply at Wuxia. Mother! Mother! A shout came from outside the door, accompanied by the sound of many hidden guards pulling out their swords. Mother, mother, is it you, mother? Is it you who is here? Arbor frowned slightly and said indifferently to the door, let her in. A thin and tall figure rushed in, stumbling and stumbling. She tripped over a small pile of firewood at the door, then steadied herself and quickly ran to Wuxia's side. Arbor turned to look at this extremely thin woman. Mu Rochuan knelt on the ground with a thud and reached out with trembling hands to support Wuxia. However, she was bounced back by a transparent barrier. Mother! Mu Rochuan was shocked and hurriedly turned to Arbor. Let my mother go. What did you do to her? She's already so old, but she's still so thin. Why won't you let her go? Crown Princess. My mother is already like this, she won't live for more than a few days. No matter how many grudges we had in the past, we can write them off now, right? No matter what, we're family. Why must we fight to the death? Arbor looked at her coldly for a moment, then raised his sleeve and removed the barrier between them. Mu Rochuan hurriedly went forward to support Wuxia, only to see that her face was as white as a sheet, and her lips were completely pale. Mother, mother! Mu Rochuan called out to her several times with tears in her eyes. Wuxia, on the other hand, seemed to be in a trance before her death. She suddenly grabbed her arm tightly. Her strength was so great that Mu Rochuan was shocked. She couldn't help but look at her face. Wuxia grabbed her hand tightly and said coldly, Rochuan, Rochuan, you have to help your sister. You have to help her, okay? You owe me, you owe me. You have to protect your sister at all costs. You have to protect her from anyone. You want to use your life to exchange for your sister's life. Did you hear that? Do you hear me? Wuxia yelled like a madwoman. With tears in her eyes, Mu Rochuan lowered her head and nodded while choking with sobs. Rochuan, you don't owe her anything. You don't have to agree to anything. A man's angry shout came from behind. Mu Rochuan was a little dazed for a moment. She looked back with teary eyes and choked up as she called out, Big brother. Mu Xingqian's face was full of anger. He stared coldly at Wuxia and said, Wuxia, what right do you have to make Rochuan agree to these things? It's very simple. She's a person who stole Mu Rochuan's birth mother's life to replace her. From the start, she never intended to give birth to Mu Rochuan. Chapter 53-49. She has no feelings for Mu Rochuan at all. In terms of feelings, she has never admitted that Mu Rochuan is her biological daughter. The only biological daughter she has acknowledged is Mu Xiaoxue. Shut up, Arbor, shut up. Wuxia roared crazily, not daring to look at Mu Rochuan, who was supporting her. What right do you have to talk about me? Arbor. You're just a ghost, a malicious spirit that crawled out of hell. You're not you at all. Gag her mouth and drag her out. Mo Lian's eyes darkened as he coldly ordered. Arbor didn't care. If she wanted to say it, then let her say it. Everyone here knew and believed in the concept of possession. As for rebirth? No one seemed to have thought of that, so it didn't matter if she spread it everywhere. Even if someone believed it, so what? The Arbor of today was no longer the Arbor of the past. Even if she was the reincarnation of a malicious spirit, no one would be able to hurt her in the slightest. But Mo Lian still didn't want to hear this woman's nonsense. She ordered someone to shut Wuxia's mouth and drag her out. Wuxia whimpered, her eyes filled with resentment and coldness as she glared at the Crown Prince and Arbor. In the end, she wanted to reach out and grab Mu Rochuan, but Mu Rochuan subconsciously retracted her hand and avoided her. You're telling the truth, aren't you? Isn't that right? Mu Rochuan stared at Xiao Mu in shock, her eyes brimming with tears as she questioned. Arbor glanced at her. I'm not interested in lying, nor do I have a reason to lie to you. In fact, you've had your suspicions for a long time, haven't you? You're both her daughters, but don't you have eyes to see her attitude toward you and Mu Xiaoxue? Can't you tell? If you've never suspected, then I can only tell you that you're very stupid. Mu Roxuan's breathing stopped as she stood there in a daze, unable to regain her senses for a long time. Did she admit it herself? Mu Roxuan felt her hands and feet turn cold. The answer that she had been searching for all these years seemed to finally have an explanation at this moment. However, this explanation made people feel incomparable despair. Her biological mother had been possessed and died a long time ago. All these years, the person who had accompanied him by his side was actually a vicious woman. All the efforts she had made, all the things she had done to please her mother, the improvement liquid, the mutation pill, and the transformation of her tissues. Looking at it now, it was just a joke. Ro Xian. Mu Xingqian sighed and looked at her silently. Mu Qingya isn't a good person. Don't fall for her tricks again, Mu Xingqian said. You don't owe her anything. You don't have to think about exchanging your life for Mu Xiaoxue's. She doesn't deserve you to treat her like this. Your Highness, Crown Princess. Xiao Yi suddenly flashed through the door and found a strange expression on his face. Something's happening. What's going on? Prince Mo glanced at him, took Arbor's little hand, and walked out. Something seems to be happening in the heavenly Tao. Xiao Yi pointed in the direction of the sky and said with a puzzled expression, I don't know why, but as soon as our people pulled Mu Qingya out, large dark clouds surged in the sky. It seems that there's going to be a lightning tribulation. Mo Lian and his wife looked at each other in dismay. Chapter 5350. Why would it send down a lightning tribulation for no reason? Mo Lian looked down and saw his wife's expression as if she was facing a great enemy. He suddenly had the urge to laugh. Why was his wife on guard against heavenly law every time? In reality, heavenly law had never once come to find trouble with her. She was the one who experienced a tribulation every time, implicating others with 8 lifetimes of bad luck. This kind of thing happened too many times, causing his wife to be paranoid every time. She always felt that heavenly law was slowly plotting to kill her in one strike. Arbor was expressionlessly led out of the woodshed by his husband, and he looked up at the sky with a gloomy face. The little stoic stood with her hands behind her back and gloomily stared at the cloud-filled sky for a long time. Hubby, hurry and open your fire and thunder umbrella. This guy urged with a stoic face and forcefully tugged at Mo Lian's sleeve. Sir Jojo had a strong premonition. The lightning tribulation this time didn't seem to be that simple. Could it be that heavenly law felt increasingly indignant after letting Jojo off the last few times, so it ran over to pick a fight and wait for an opportunity to take revenge? The little stoic's eyes were cold, and she looked up at the sky with a solemn expression. Everyone, pay attention. An unknown hidden guard roared with joy, and the courtyard inexplicably felt like it was in chaos. They saw a dazzling red heavenly flame shoot down from the sky. In a split second, everyone felt like their eyes were about to be blinded by that dazzling red color. Then they heard a loud boom. Mo Lian held a fire and thunder umbrella and silently glanced in the direction where the flame fell. It was very far from where they were standing. It was very obvious that this heavenly flame wasn't directed at the paranoid Sir Jojo. It was clearly directed at Mu Qingya. At this time, Mu Qingya was completely enveloped by a ball of raging flames. She was wrapped in a ball of burning heavenly flame from head to toe, and she suddenly let out maniacal laughter. When Mu Roxuan rushed out, she just happened to see Mu Qingya raise her hands like a lunatic and look up at the sky. She laughed maniacally and roared angrily, "Come! Come! I've had enough of this useless body. Heavenly Tao, use the flames to cleanse and burn my body. This way, my soul can return to the past." Ha 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 ha. I can go back, ha ha ha, I can finally go back. My time is waiting for me. My future is waiting for me. Heavenly Tao, you can't fool me. I will go back. In the end, I will still return to my own era, ha 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 ha. I will change my body and continue living, ha ha ha. Mu Rochuan looked at the crazy woman in shock. Under the blazing heavenly fire, she was still laughing crazily and murmuring some strange words to herself. Mu Rochuan could even see that under the burning of the heavenly fire, the woman's skin was rapidly drained of moisture. Her arms and legs were completely broken, and she fell into the flames. Mu Qingya, however, was still oblivious to it. She continued to wail and howl. In the end, her head was completely struck by the heavenly fire, and her body was burned to ashes, not even leaving behind a trace of ash. Mu Rochuan stared blankly at the scene before her and stammered, Where did she say her soul would go? Mu Xingchen shook his head. The might of the heavenly fire is unparalleled. Mu Qingya's soul has already been shattered by the heavenly fire and scattered between heaven and earth. Rochuan, Mu Qingya has already completely disappeared. She can't go back. Mu Rochuan shuddered. Chapter 53-51. Was this Mu Qingya's final ending? She had completely disappeared from every corner of the world. The first madam of the Talisman family, the high-spirited Hall Master Mu of Heavenly Fate, had ended up with her soul scattered and a miserable ending. The last thing she did before she disappeared was not what she, Mu Rochuan, had imagined. She looked at her eldest daughter one last time, hugged her, and even softly wished her happiness. Nothing, 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 nothing. Mu Qingya was even stingy with showing her a warm smile. Her last words were to use her life to protect Xiao Shui and protect her younger sister with all her might. Mu Rochuan smiled bitterly. The old scar on her face was like a trembling centipede, and it opened a little sinisterly. Arbor turned his head and subconsciously glanced at her. This half-sister of his looked very haggard. Her body Arbor looked at her and his gaze froze. Seeing this, Mu Xingchen's body also stiffened. He asked with a slightly nervous expression, Jojo, is there something wrong with Rochuan's body? Xiao Mu cast an indifferent glance at Mu Rochuan. Ask her. Other than herself, no one knows her body better than her. Then, he paused for a moment and asked indifferently, Mu Rochuan, you've already started the second stage of improvement, right? Have you felt anything wrong with your body recently? Mu Rochuan's body trembled and she looked at Arbor with a complicated expression. Mu Xingchen looked over in shock and shouted angrily, Rochuan, you actually took Heavenly Fate's improved medicine. You're really muddle-headed. Muddle-headed. Mu Xingchen's exasperated expression fell into Mu Rochuan's eyes and deeply stimulated her heart. Mu Rochuan suddenly screamed at the top of her lungs, do you think I wanted this? Big brother, we grew up together. Where were you when father crippled my cultivation and pushed me out to self-destruct? Where were you when I was in that corner of the branch family, not having enough to eat, not having enough to wear, and being bullied everywhere? No one will help my big brother. No one in this world will stand by my side and help me. Mu Rochuan suddenly covered her face and cried. Her cries were miserable and filled with despair. She's the only one in your eyes. Mu Rochuan pointed at Arbor and screamed, there's only her, not me. Big brother, do you know? It turns out that my life is a tragedy. I, Mu Rochuan, don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Before she appeared, I always felt that my talisman drawing talent was #1 in the world. Ha, ha ha ha. Who would have thought that I would be a complete joke in everyone's eyes? I fought with her, I fought with my family. I was the only one who fought for my unfair fate. What about you guys? None of them stood by my side. Even my big brother, who has been with me for so many years, could lose me just like that. To be able to completely disregard my life or death. Mu Xingchen stood there in a daze, unable to say anything. Rochuan's complaints should have accumulated in her heart for a long time. Now that they suddenly erupted, it was like a volcano erupting. The various negative emotions that had accumulated in the bottom of her heart endlessly spread. Big brother, what does she have and what do I have? Even my mother is fake. Mu Rochuan choked with sobs. Chapter 53-52. Even my mother is a fake. You're right, Arbor. Mu Rochuan lowered her head and took a step back. I'm stupid. I didn't even suspect mother's true identity when she gave me the improved medicine. It wasn't until I saw Xiao Shui that I deeply felt that mother's attitude toward me was completely different from her attitude toward Xiao Shui. Because I've always held on to a sliver of hope. Now that I look like a cripple, perhaps if I listen to my mother, I will be able to win her favor. I've never refuted her. Arbor, do you know? Before you appeared, at least she was still. Mu Rochuan choked with sobs and almost couldn't continue. She still treated me as her daughter. Although she's always been cold and indifferent to me without much tenderness, at least she wouldn't break my heart like this. She wouldn't make me despair. You won, Arbor. I'm a complete loser. I'm inferior to you. Mu Rochuan laughed and turned to leave in a daze. However, an extremely icy voice entered her ears. You were never my match. Mu Xingchen's heart couldn't help but tremble. He almost couldn't bear to look at Rochuan's expression. He could imagine how despaired and defeated she must be right now. When the little stoic was soft and adorable, it could melt your heart. However, when she was cold-blooded and heartless, it would give birth to an indescribable fear. Mu Rochuan's departing figure staggered slightly before she suddenly left in large strides while laughing maniacally. Yes, how ironic. The imaginary enemy she wholeheartedly thought of didn't care about her at all. Was there anything more humiliating than this? Mu Rochuan practically covered her face and fled in defeat. She didn't dare to look back, let alone glance at the people behind her. Arbor, this cold-hearted and emotionless woman, knew how to destroy a person's willpower with one sentence. Mu Xingchen stood there in a daze and watched Mu Rochuan's fleeing figure. He let out a long sigh. Jojo, what do you think will happen to Rochuan in the end? Her body already shows signs of crumbling and turning into a corpse. This means that she hasn't changed for the better, Arbor said indifferently. Her expression was extremely ice-cold. It was as if there was simply no relationship between her and Mu Rochuan. In the end, there are only two outcomes. First, if the modification was successful, it would become a perfect walking corpse. The best result might be that it would have its own thoughts. Secondly, the improvement would fail completely. Her physical body would collapse and turn into a pile of mud. Mu Xingchen's body trembled, and his voice trembled slightly. Can we help her, Jojo? Arbor glanced at her elder brother and sighed softly. Instead of answering, he asked, Elder brother, do you think Mu Rochuan will accept my help? If Mu Rochuan wanted to save herself, she would naturally ask Mu Xingchen for help. But she didn't do that. It was obvious that Mu Rochuan didn't think that she needed to be treated. Arbor wasn't born with the halo of a Virgin Mary. She didn't have to save everyone she saw. Since Mu Roxian had asked Big Brother for help, she naturally couldn't just stand by and watch. But if the other party didn't ask, she wouldn't necessarily be willing to meddle in other people's business. The little stoic's question dumbstruck Mu Xingchen. He stood there in a daze, unable to speak. That's right, how could Rochuan accept Jojo's help with her arrogant personality? Chapter 53-53. Back then, when Rochuan was struck by lightning, she refused Jojo's help no matter what and treated Jojo rudely. The scene was still vivid in his mind. One could imagine how much Rochuan hated Jojo in her heart. With her pride and loftiness, it was impossible for her to beg Jojo. Even if this plea could save her life and perhaps give her a new life. After all, after Mr. Su of Beiwang Valley met up with Fairy Huang He and the others, the research and development of the antidote had entered a rapid development stage. After a period of experimentation and final research, they should be able to successfully develop a solution that could overcome or save her. But the premise of all this was that Rochuan had to speak up and say that she wanted to break away from the heavenly fate and detoxify herself. Otherwise, with his understanding of his sister, Mu Xingqian knew that his sister would never take the initiative to help and insist on chasing after Rochuan, begging to detoxify her. However, Rochuan was unwilling to speak up. If Mu Xingqian glanced at Arbor hesitantly, Mo Lien frowned slightly, took Arbor's little hand, and walked out of the courtyard. With a cold expression, he said, "Big brother, you'd better think carefully. Are you going to ruin your good relationship with others for the sake of an ignorant woman?" Mu Xingqian was speechless. Brother-in-law's words were almost a threat. In other words, if he spoke up, brother-in-law might be the first to break off relations with him. Mu Xingqian was a little distressed. He knew that he was indeed being a little too forceful. How could his sister take the initiative to say that she wanted to treat Rochuan? Brother-in-law could not bear to let her compromise like this. Moreover, Rochuan might not necessarily accept his sister's kindness. But how could he bear to watch Rochuan walk step by step into the abyss of death? Thump. A small winter date, separated by the courtyard wall, suddenly fell on his head. Mu Xingqian looked up and saw Sikong Fuling half hanging on the wall, suddenly smiling brightly at him. Mu Xingqian leaped and landed on the wall, asking with a puzzled expression, "Why are you here? Would you believe me if I said that I'm here to watch the show?" Mu Xingqian's expression was indifferent. Miss Sikong came all the way from the River of Forgetfulness to Dragon Flame City to watch the show. Looks like he's really free. Please forgive me for not keeping you company. Hey! Sikong Fuling tilted her head and grumpily yelled at him, "You are such a boring person. Are you going to leave without even saying a word? You finally know that I came all the way here. As the host, shouldn't you take good care of your guest? There is little common ground between people of different paths," Mu Xingqian said indifferently. "Miss Sikong, I advise you to return to where you came from. Don't cause trouble in the city. Who knows what my sister would do if she saw you?" Sikong Fuling stomped her feet in exasperation and shouted at Mu Xingqian's back, "The little stoic also has to be reasonable. I only came to the imperial capital of the divine prefecture for a stroll. Could it be that this stoic face will eat me up?" Mu Xingqian ignored her and walked out of the door. Sikong Fuling crouched on the wall, stomping her feet in anger. The Mu family siblings were both quite abominable. Both of them could make someone stomp their feet in anger with less than 3 sentences. Sikong Fuling stared at his back and muttered, "He's really heartless enough." Chapter 53-54. You were too fierce to eldest brother just now. You rebuked him until he couldn't say anything. The little stoic tugged at Mo Lien's hand and pursed her lips at him in displeasure. Then look at him, he's so indecisive and hesitant. After eldest Miss Mu pretended to be pitiful, it looks like he's about to switch sides immediately. Mo Lien was furious. I directly interrupted him to prevent him from saying anything that would cause you to be mistreated. Simply baffling. Eldest brother sometimes looks like a rather astute person, but sometimes he looks especially muddle-headed. He even planned to beg you to go over and treat Miss Mu. Our crown princess isn't a medical lady who saves this and that and saves just anyone. What does it have to do with us when other people are bent on seeking death? Your eldest brother is really, the little stoic listened as this man prattled on and on about Big Brother this and Big Brother that, thoroughly dissing Big Brother. She found it funny for a moment, but she also couldn't help but feel touched. Jojo's Lotus always stood by Jojo's side out of habit and rebuked anyone who didn't treat her well. This kind of unreserved trust allowed her to do anything without the slightest apprehension. The little stoic pursed her lips and squeezed his palm with her soft hand. Don't be angry. Eldest brother, he has a simple and honest personality. He naturally couldn't bear to see Mu Rochuan in such a miserable state. I understand eldest brother's thinking. In the end, she's still his younger sister. If he could help her, he would definitely spare no effort to help her. Prince Mo's handsome face was taut. But he still can't push you out and compromise. The little stoic reached out and pinched his chin with all her might. She looked at him with curved eyes. I've never been someone who would suffer grievances. Mu Rochuan herself didn't even want to turn back, so how could I possibly drag her back? My relationship with her isn't that good. Besides, my dead mother is still between us. In the end, she's still Mu Qingya's daughter. Her mother and I have a blood feud. Although everything has come to an end with Mu Qingya's death, the grudges between people are not so easy to end. Besides, Mu Rochuan herself doesn't wish for us to drag her down. Let her be. Mo Lien gave a "hmm" and said with a nod, "It's great that you can think this way. I was so worried about you. In order to give eldest brother face, you had to sacrifice yourself to do something that you were unwilling to do." The little stoic grinned. "I'm not that stupid." She looked tired and stretched out her hand to yawn. "I'm still pregnant. I don't have that much energy." Mo Lien's eyes lit up. He quickly stretched out his arms and pulled his wife into his arms. "Wife, I'll carry you back. You can rest along the way. If you want to sleep, you can lean on me and sleep for a while." The little stoic glared at him. "If you openly carry me through the city gates, gossip will spread again tomorrow." Mo Lien lowered his head and pecked her. "If anyone dares to be long-winded, I'll have Yuba lead people to cut off those tongues." Arbor was both helpless and amused. She pinched his sleeve. "Hubby." She yawned again and leaned into his arms. "Then I'll sleep first." "Sleep. We'll be home soon." The little stoic mumbled and quickly fell into a deep sleep. Right now, it was like someone had set her time. When it was time, no matter where she was, she could fall asleep while standing. It was just this miraculous. Chapter 53-55. The next morning, Arbor was woken up by the clamor in the court. She looked up at the bed veil and then at the brilliant sunlight shining in through the window. Presumably, it was already noon. Recently, her drowsiness had become more and more serious, but every time she checked her pulse, there was nothing wrong with it. Not only was there nothing wrong with it, but her body was as healthy as a calf. She took a body-strengthening pill every 3 days, and the royal physicians lined up to check her pulse 3 times in the morning, noon, and night. She was healthy every time, so healthy that it made everyone envious. But it was this perfectly healthy body that was incredibly drowsy every day. Especially during this period of time, she would fall asleep at the appointed time. She had to sleep at the appointed time every night and would only wake up at the appointed time every day. When she was awake, she was as lively as a dragon and as lively as a tiger, and she could beat a cow to death even if they were separated by a mountain. But when it was time for the afternoon, she had to sleep again at the appointed time. When it was time for the afternoon, she would get up to move around and have a meal. When it was time for the evening, she would crawl into bed and sleep soundly. It was such a comical cycle. Sir Jojo did some calculations for himself. Excluding the time needed to eat and wash up, she would probably only be awake for 2 hours in the afternoon. No wonder all the royal maids and eunuchs around him were so nervous, as if they were facing a great enemy. It was truly because their crown princess had slept for too long. However, His Highness the Crown Prince, who had always doted on the Crown Princess, wasn't that nervous this time. He merely glanced at his wife's stomach with an indescribable gaze every time. Arbor shuffled off the bed. When she looked up, she saw Tsaishio push open the door and enter, hastily running toward her. "Crown Princess, why did you come down by yourself?" Sir Jojo expressionlessly stroked her stomach and bounced lightly. "Don't look at how big my stomach is. In fact, my body is as light as a swallow right now, and I can even carry the wind with me when I walk. Saishio silently lowered her head, and the corner of her mouth involuntarily twitched. However, her movements weren't slow, and she had already gone up to support the young crown princess. "Crown princess, let this servant help you to wash up." The little stoic feigned indifference and asked, "Why is it so noisy outside?" Kai Shio pursed her lips and smiled, "His Highness the Crown Prince has brought Master, Madam, Second Master, and Second Madam's family to the Eastern Palace. What your Highness means is that it will be the new year soon. Your body is getting heavier by the day, so it's not convenient for you to come and go. Why don't you bring everyone over and stay in the palace to celebrate the new year together?" The little stoic's eyes brightened, but her expression remained haughty and delicate as she quietly muttered, "He's the only one who's meddlesome." Kai Chi walked over and heard these words. She quickly held back her laughter and said, "When this servant came over just now, I saw Miss Lin, pulling a few palace maids and playing with the teapot. Miss Lin, must have achieved a complete victory." The little stoic uttered an "oh" and put on a small, "I'm not too interested" expression, but her feet involuntarily walked towards the door. Kai Shio hurriedly smiled and pulled her, "Crown Princess, please let this servant do your hair before going out." "Emichem." Kai Chi also said, "You still have to change your clothes." Only then did the little stoic realize that in her happiness, she wanted to rent out her uncombed hair and clothes just like that. Hence, this fellow resentfully stopped and nodded, saying in deadly earnest, "Bring that red one over." The crown princess really had a lot of red battle clothes. Because her stomach had gotten big recently, she had the manufacturing department rush out a batch of new clothes. Chapter 53-56. Holding back her laughter, Saichi took out a red dress of the latest design for her and quickly walked to her side. After the little crown princess finished washing up and putting on her clothes, she subconsciously reached out to stroke her round belly and asked in all seriousness, "Saishio, do you feel that my entire body is emitting heat recently? Especially around my belly, it seems like heat waves are rolling in." Sometimes, when she touched it herself, she could feel that her belly was a little hot. It was simply a little comical. The corner of Saishio's mouth twitched, and she calmly nodded. "That's right. But Crown Princess, your belly doesn't allow others to get close. Whenever someone wants to touch it, they will be shaken away. Cough, that's why we don't feel the heat waves from afar." She was pregnant, and so was the Crown Princess. But why did they feel that the Crown Princess's pregnancy was so strange and miraculous? The little Crown Princess nodded and lightly patted her belly. She muttered to herself, "Child, you have to be good. Don't be like your father. Your father tormented his mother badly back then. You can't be like him." Saishio and Saichi held back their laughter and looked at each other. Then, they followed the nagging Crown Princess and walked out. Just as they left the bedchamber, they saw Wei Ziqin and Auntie Ren walking over together. When the two saw her, they smiled happily and hurried over to ask, "Jojo, when did you wake up? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? The imperial physicians have been waiting outside for a long time. Why don't you call them in?" Ren hurriedly said. Arbor thought for a moment and nodded. Those old grandpas didn't have it easy. They were arranged here by His Majesty and the Empress, and they had to treat her 3 meals a day. The psychological pressure of being on tenterhooks must be very great. The sooner they finished their treatment, the sooner they could calm their restless hearts and arrange for them to return to their rooms to rest. Not long after, 7 or 8 old physicians walked in and took the little crown princess's pulse as usual. A head imperial physician with the surname Zhang said, "The crown princess's pulse is stable and healthy." But Wei Ziqin's heart skipped a beat when she heard the old imperial physician's words. She asked nervously, "But what?" Old imperial physician Zhang hurriedly said, "Madam Qiao, there is no need to worry. I just think that the crown princess's hypersomnia is a little serious. Now, the crown princess was awake for no more than 6 hours a day. She slept for a total of 16 to 18 hours a day. The imperial physicians felt that something was wrong and they were panicking. He was just worried that something would happen to this golden nugget. If that happened, even the 9 generations of his family would be implicated. The little crown princess gave them a kind smile. But this strange smile, in the eyes of the imperial physicians, felt that the little crown princess was giving them a very serious and cold smile. The hearts of the old physicians could not help but tremble. The little stoic said to the elderly physicians, "You don't need to worry. I know my body very well, there's nothing wrong with it. Alright, you can all go back and rest first." Wei Ziqin watched as the 2 eunuchs sent the physicians back. She looked at Arbor with deep worry. "Jojo, you can't hide anything from Mom." "Mom, I'm not hiding anything from you." Arbor looked at his mother helplessly. "It's really nothing, Mom. How about I demonstrate a sword technique for you to see?" Wei Ziqin and Ren Madam quickly pounced over to pull her back. Chapter 53-57. The 2 of them hurriedly cried out, Don't. Good child, sit down. Just sit down. What swordplay? Don't scare people." Arbor was rather helpless, but he still obeyed and sat down with the help of his sisters-in-law. Wei Ziqin heaved a sigh of relief and looked at her daughter worriedly. She couldn't help but turn her head and wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes. Madame Ren saw this and hurriedly tugged at her sleeve. "Mother!" Xiao Lin suddenly jumped in front of the 3 of them and tilted her head to look at the red marks under Wei Ziqin's eyes. "What's wrong, Mother? Why are your eyes red?" "No, nothing." Wei Ziqin hurriedly waved her hand. Madame Ren smiled and pulled Xiao Lin to Arbor's side. She stroked Xiao Lin's little head and said, "Lin, sit here with sister and talk for a while. Your mother and I will go to the kitchen to get lunch. Your mother personally cooked today and specially made braised fish and silver thread tofu soup. You guys are in for a treat." Arbor couldn't help but feel helpless. "Second aunt, just get 2 palace maids to get it." No need. They don't know which dishes were made by your mother." Madame Ren said with a smile. "They'll be back in a while. Just wait." Madame Ren hurriedly pulled Wei Ziqin away and walked around the flowering trees in the courtyard. After walking a little further, she said, "Sister-in-law, don't cry. If the child sees you, I'm afraid she'll be nervous too." Wei Ziqin couldn't help but tear up. "But Jojo's belly changes every day. It's like it's growing crazily. It looks too big now. She's such a young child, and this is her first child. How can she bear it?" In Wei Ziqin's view, her daughter was still a child, but now she had to suffer so much. With such a big belly, her daughter must be putting on an act in front of them every time. She only made it sound easy, but in reality, she must be suffering a lot. "Jojo, this child, is always like this. She refuses to tell us everything and only bears it silently." Wei Ziqin's eyes reddened as she choked with sobs. "Sister-in-law, don't worry. Our family's Xiao Qiao has always been a blessed child. Nothing will happen to her." Besides, the emperor and the empress had also sent many experienced old nannies over. He even hired 5 midwives. With us by her side, Jojo and his mother will be safe. Wei Ziqin replied in a nasal voice and nodded heavily. After the 2 of them hurriedly left, Mo Lian's slender figure appeared under a flowering tree. She silently looked at the backs of Wei Ziqin and Ren Shi as they left. Her hands under her sleeves were clenched into fists. Arbor suddenly realized that her husband seemed to be getting more and more bored. She didn't know if it was because the imperial court had started to take a break, but this fellow had nothing to do all day long. He hung around her all day long, and even wanted to pass a cup of tea to her mouth. He didn't even let her hold a book. Reading books is harmful to your eyes and your body. Let's wait until after you give birth and have some free time to read. This fellow didn't know if he was possessed, but he kept spouting nonsense every day. She had already told him that her body was fine, but this fellow was still suspicious. He kept thinking that she was pretending to be relaxed and at ease. It's because your husband is incompetent. I'm not as attentive as mother and second aunt. I neglected you a lot in the past. Last night, this fellow had held her hand with a serious expression and said, "Don't worry, until you give birth to the child. Your husband will always be by your side to accompany you and take care of you. Why are you looking at your husband like that?" Chapter 53-58. This guy kissed her and completely ignored her sullen expression. He said to himself, "Wifey, you must be very happy. Your husband will definitely keep an eye on you day and night." Arbor really wanted to slap him until he fainted. She didn't know what went wrong, but her husband suddenly changed. She wanted to say that she really didn't need someone to keep an eye on her. She swore that she could kill a dragon from a distance right now. There was nothing wrong with her body. Her body was as light as a swallow, and she didn't feel bloated and powerless like a pregnant woman in the later stages of pregnancy. Why didn't her husband understand human language? "Husband, you don't have to keep accompanying me." Xiao Mian's face was expressionless as she said mercilessly, "You can go do whatever you need to do." This man was simply too annoying. It wasn't like her hands were crippled. He even wanted to deprive her of the joy of peeling oranges. So annoying. Just looking at his handsome face was enough for Lord Jojo. Mo Lien blinked and watched in confusion as his wife slammed the palace door shut, shutting him outside. "Pfft, ha 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 ha," a mocking laugh came from behind. Mo Lien didn't need to turn around to know who dared to arrogantly mock the crown prince. "Rotten peach blossoms, are you itching for a beating?" Mo Lien gritted her teeth. Hu Shichen shook the wine pot with one hand and said with a smile, "Jojo already dislikes you so much. I advise you not to be an eyesore." Mo Lien was about to retort when a palace servant hurriedly came to report that Her Majesty the Empress had arrived. Bai Wuxia came to see his daughter-in-law with a carriage full of tonics. After a few words, he stared at his daughter-in-law's stomach with worry. Later, the emperor bestowed a lot of things and sent several experienced nannies over. The group of people was nervous, causing the entire eastern palace to be jittery. That night, Prince Mo ran back to his bedchamber with his face covered in dirt. He repeatedly complained to his wife that he had been summoned by Imperial Mother and severely scolded. Arbor was baffled. "Why is Mother scolding you all of a sudden?" "Imperial Mother scolded your husband for being unreliable, saying that I didn't stay by your side to take good care of you, saying that your belly is already so big. I still wander around outside all day long. Don't you see me staying in the bedroom and not leaving the house at all? I'm considerate and accompanying you." Arbor couldn't help but laugh. "Husband, you know I'm fine. Since when have you been so gullible? After what my mother and second aunt said, even you think that my belly is abnormally big and that it will be difficult for me to give birth?" Mo Lien gazed at her with a profound gaze, and he reflexively grasped her hand as he stammered, I really am a bit worried." Arbor looked at him and couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Don't be so nervous with them, okay? Look. It's your nonchalant attitude that makes people panic." Mo Lien suddenly reached out to hug her and pressed her forehead against hers. He said unhappily, "You always look like you're the one holding up the sky even if it falls down. I can help you with everything else, but this matter, I really can't help you at all." Arbor really couldn't control her laughter. She laughed at him and teased, "Why don't we use the soul-swapping talisman, and you help me give birth?" Mo Lien looked at his wife with a dumbfounded expression. This wife, why is she so outstanding and different from the rest? Chapter 53-59. Prince Mo looked at his wife in a daze. He blinked his eyes and looked at her with a sullen expression. In the end, he made up his mind and nodded pitifully. Wife, then hurry up and do it. Arbor looked at him, who looked like he was going to sacrifice himself. His lips were pursed into a straight line and his handsome face was tense. He even closed his eyes in fear. She couldn't help but laugh out loud. Then, her eyes became watery as she reached out to hold his face and took the initiative to bite his lips. I say, are you stupid? I'm just joking with you. You want to replace me, but my baby won't agree. She was already pregnant to this extent, how could she run away and become a deserter? Besides, how could she bear to let her husband, a man, suffer like this? What right do you have to deprive me of the joy of being a mother? Lord Jojo glared at her and snorted. You're really a fool. Mo Lien abruptly opened his eyes, which were suffused with a gentle light as he stared straight at her. Arbor lowered her head and touched her belly. Do you know? I'm looking forward to the birth of this child. I'm looking forward to being able to hold the baby's hand and travel around the 3 states as a family. Wife. Mo Lien reached out to hug her excitedly. But now that her belly was getting bigger, he was so nervous that he didn't know where to put his hands. Lord Jojo was amused and annoyed at the same time. Belly. Mo Lien hugged her with a big belly between them. Jojo, you're so nice. If Arbor had a tail, she would be in heaven right now. She shook her head and patted the back of his hand. Let go. I'm very tired these days. I don't even have the energy to care about Wushuang and Xuanxuan's marriage. You have to be more concerned. Wife. Mo Lien hugged her. Everyone else is fine. I'm just worried about your belly. I already said that I'm fine. Xiao Mu cast him a sidelong glance. You're normally very calm, so why are you blindly getting nervous when they get nervous? Me too. It's so big that it's ridiculous. Mo Lien stammered, if you feel unwell, you must remember to tell me immediately. Got it? I know. Arbor rubbed his belly and asked on a whim, Jojo's Lotus, do you think my baby is practicing martial arts in my belly? The corners of Mo Lien's mouth twitched as she nodded seriously. That's very likely. Perhaps our baby's innate talent is far beyond that of ordinary people. Xiao Mu glanced at him before suddenly bursting into laughter. Why are you so shameless and smug? I was just casually asking and you went with the flow to compliment me. You're so funny. Mo Lien rolled his eyes inwardly. You didn't believe me. I suspect that our baby is making you sleepy because he needs to practice martial arts. Husband, let me tell you a joke. Mo Lien, his wife had become much more lively recently. She would laugh at him from time to time. Not only did she daze him, she was even telling him jokes now. Crown Prince Mo's heart was brimming with incomparable excitement. It really wasn't a waste of his care all these years. His wifey had finally been enlightened. Wife, tell me. Your husband is listening. Mo Lien nodded. Chapter 5360. Husband, I don't know if it's just my imagination, but I feel like I'm about to level up again. Mo Lien was speechless. It seems like my divine senses are about to level up too. I feel like I haven't been cultivating properly recently. After I got pregnant, I rarely went to the star sector. Why am I leveling up again? Sir Jojo was perplexed. Husband, do you think other pregnant women are like this too? Mo Lien looked serious. Wife, I don't think anyone is like you. You're a special case. Why don't you guess, husband? I guess baby Mo is doing something in your stomach. Xiao Mu was startled, and then she carefully recalled it before coming to a realization. Hubby, I must agree with your view. Husband, when you look at me, do you see any strange movements in my stomach? The two mumbled as they walked towards the bed. The two maidservants, Kai Xiu and Kai Chi, stifled a belly full of laughter. They quickly followed, put down the gold-threaded curtain, and quietly retreated out of the door. In the following days, everyone was quite busy. Third Fu Wushuang and Qi Xianxian, the two newlyweds, successfully got married and completed an important event in their lives. They heard that Third Fu's stepmother, Madame Bao, fainted from anger because Third Young Master Fu was promoted to the youngest first-rank guardian general. The courtiers knew that His Majesty was already preparing for the Crown Prince's ascension to the throne. He was promoting a group of young talents and they would become the new emperor's trusted aides in the future. Because Sir Jojo was seriously ill, His Majesty specially allowed him not to attend the New Year's banquet. Right now, Crown Prince Mo was guarding his wife at all times. Wherever his wife was, he would be there. On New Year's Eve, many fireworks were set off after the banquet to celebrate. His Majesty was probably in a good mood. This was the first time the Empress spent the New Year with him after she woke up. Arbor was in a good mood today. She stayed up with her family. Qiao Sen had already come out of seclusion 2 days ago. Looking at the lively scene in the courtyard, he couldn't help but feel emotional. I remember that everyone hasn't gathered together for a long time. Let's celebrate the new year together. Jolin smiled and nodded. Yes. Ever since elder sister left home to study at the Holy Water sect, she rarely spent New Year's with them. After that, they went to the 6 prefectures and then to the Divine Land. They thought that their sister would be further and further away from their family. Unexpectedly, as long as the hearts of family members were connected, they would not be separated no matter where they went. It's coming, it's coming. The hot dumplings are here. Qi Xianxian smiled and called out to her companions, helping them to take over the plates that the little palace maids were busy handing over. There are all kinds of fillings. Help yourself. Everyone held their bowls and eagerly lined up to get dumplings. They shouted, I don't want the sauce, I want it, 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 I want it. As Qiao Mu and Mo Lian sat under the lantern light, they would occasionally raise their heads to glance at the rowdy crowd. The man's fingers were long and slender as he peeled pine nuts with his head lowered. The woman expressionlessly reached out her small paw from time to time to take the pine nuts he had peeled from his palm. In the eyes of the crowd, the two of them looked like an old married couple, sitting there calmly, one peeling pine nuts, the other eating pine nuts, the other peeling pine nuts, the other eating pine nuts, the appearance of leisure and peace. Mo Lian suddenly clapped his hands and took out a jade messenger talisman from his bosom. Chapter 53-61. Sir Jojo didn't even look up as he coolly asked, What are you saying, Duan Yu? Mo Lian was taken aback. He glanced at his wife and coughed lightly. How about, wife, you take a look for yourself. The little stoic extended a claw without hesitation. Mo Lian speechlessly placed the communication jade talisman in her palm. Arbor inspected it and harumphed. Oh, you two are in contact quite frequently. Mo Lian speechlessly twitched her mouth before saying with an embarrassed chuckle, It's usually him contacting me, and him contacting me, heh heh. Jojo's Lian, Duan Yu said he dug up a lot of holy stone ores. Arbor's eyes lit up, and she said, Oh right, didn't you say that Hui Feng, Venerable Immortal Jin, Zhao Sheng, Liang Yi, and the others will return after the new year? How many holy stone ores did they dig up compared to Duan Yu's? Mo Lian grumpily retorted, How could that be the same? Duan Yu, that guy, sent many people to dig. There aren't many people left at Huifeng's place, so the progress won't be that fast. Moreover, they also spent a lot of time dispelling the array that forefather Chao Yang left behind. Forefather Chao Yang was truly too deceitful. Thankfully, Venerable Immortal Jin and the other 3 transcending divinity realms were left there. Otherwise, Hui Feng and his bunch of weaklings might not be able to escort a portion of the ores back so smoothly. Arbor pursed her lips. In other words, you're not as reliable as Duan Yu. Wife, what did you say? Mo Lien dangerously narrowed her eyes. Arbor quickly shut her mouth and continued to look down at his communication jade talisman. Hubby, Duan Yu said he'll come to visit us after the new year. Mo Lien harumphed, both agreeing and disagreeing. Last time, he gave Wa a piece of jade, but I don't know what it's for. That jade doesn't look like an ordinary item. It can't be something like a token, right? Arbor asked curiously. Wa quite likes this jade. When I held it, baby seemed to be happy for a while, and my stomach felt warm. The corners of Mo Lien's mouth twitched. She thought to herself, this is not good. Why does it seem like this child doesn't reject anyone? What if he was cheated by someone with a piece of candy? What's so funny about a piece of broken jade? I'll give you 10,000 pieces of jade later. Every piece is more exquisite and beautiful than this. Arbor rolled his eyes at him. What do I need so much jade for? You can cut me some blank jade pieces and keep them for emergencies. His Majesty has arrived. Her Majesty has arrived. Everyone hurriedly stood up upon hearing this, but Celestial Empress and Celestial Empress had already walked in hand like a gust of wind. Mo Lusheng laughed heartily and said, all right, don't be in a hurry to salute. The family was staying up late to celebrate the new year, so there was no need to stand on ceremony. Sit down, eat, drink, and do whatever you need to do. Mother is here to see Jojo. Bai Wuxia said to the Crown Prince with a smile, the royal physicians have been nagging that she'll probably give birth in these few days. Crown Prince, you have to stay by your wife's side these few days and pay attention. Mother, I don't need you to remind me. Mo Lien huffed, I've always been careful and cautious. Okay, I know you're careful. It's just that mother is worried. Bai Wuxia turned around and quickly pulled Wei Ziqin to say with a smile, in-law, don't be busy. Come, sit down. Today, we'll have a lively meal of dumplings. Everyone present is family, so there's no need to be restrained. Chapter 53-62. Quick, bring 2 sets of clean bowls and chopsticks for His Majesty and Her Ladyship. Wei Ziqin hurriedly called out to the palace maids shuttling back and forth with a smile. Immediately, a nimble palace maid stepped forward and bowed to prepare clean cutlery for the Emperor and Empress before retreating. The Emperor said happily, eating with a bunch of old things just now was tasteless. It's definitely better to eat some salted vegetables with shortbread when I'm with my family. It's not bad either. Everyone was flattered. At first, they were still a little restrained, but when they realized that the Emperor and Empress were approachable and didn't put on any airs, the atmosphere gradually became harmonious. Not long after, a servant came to report that Prince Kong and the Princess Consort had arrived. Everyone hurriedly went to welcome them and brought the Prince and Princess Consort in to eat some dumplings together. Later, someone brought out wine, and the group of people drank while reciting poems. Inexplicably, several people got drunk. Second uncle was the first to fall. Without exception, the Emperor and Prince Kong chatted as they drank. Mo Lien saw the hustle and bustle below, so he simply hid on the roof with his wife in his arms. The two of them looked up at the starry sky and saw that tonight's starry sky was full of brilliant stars. Then, they looked down at the group of people who had long fallen into unconsciousness and couldn't help but look at each other speechlessly. I hope that everyone is safe and sound. It would be great if we could celebrate the new year together every year in the future. Sir Jojo muttered thoughtfully in a low voice. As long as you want, it will definitely be possible. Mo Lien held his wife's small hand and said with a smile, this husband promises you that every new year in the future, even if they are scattered all over the world, this husband will order people to pack them up one by one and bring them to us to celebrate the new year together. Arbor's eyes widened as she looked at her husband, who had a serious expression and was swearing a vow. She couldn't help but burst into laughter. You are too cheating. Don't worry, this husband believes that I have the right to do so. Mo Lien rubbed his wife's small hand and leaned closer to her mysteriously. I see that the old man is secretly making arrangements. I reckon that he wants to quit his duties at the beginning of the new year and toss the throne to this husband. Arbor was secretly amused. She reached out to hold his large hand and looked at him seriously. Husband, no matter where you go, I'll go with you. Do whatever you want. If there's an official who is disrespectful to you in the future, I'll beat him until he's convinced. Mo Lien's eyes brightened, and he immediately revealed an aggrieved expression. He leaned his head against Xiao Mu and nodded rascally. Wife, then you have to protect hubby well. Xiao Mu nodded vigorously. I will, hubby. Mo Lien couldn't resist beaming brightly when he saw her serious expression. Out of nowhere, a wine glass came flying at his head. He turned his head sideways to avoid it and glared over. He saw a rotten peach blossom dressed in red, incomparably flirtatious, leaning lazily on the opposite eaves, holding a wine pot and shaking it at him. Time seemed to stop at this moment. The starlight that filled the sky blended together with the hustle and bustle of this moment. Arbor's heart was filled with joy. Early the next morning, all the corps higher-ups in the 3 provinces received a piece of important news. A large number of eagle mutants and corpse puppets of the Sky Fate organization were rushing to the small country of Qing province, which was adjacent to Tsang province. In less than 2 hours, they broke through Qing province with the power of thunder and killed the king of Qing province at the city gate. Chapter 53-63. The situation became tense all of a sudden. The emperor had summoned the crown prince and the courtiers early in the morning. They had been extremely busy since the first day of the Lunar New Year and had been discussing for the entire day. On the second day of the Lunar New Year, the imperial court had issued various prohibitions and measures. Mo Lien basically handed over everything to Third Fu and the others, while he himself stayed by his wifey's side and accompanied her obediently without setting a foot outside. The pitiful third young master, who had just been married, had been as busy as a spinning top these days. Arbor and Mo Lien, this unscrupulous couple, had become the most free couple in the entire 3 states. Since Qiao Qiao was addicted to sleeping all day long, Mo Lien would sleep with her. Occasionally, she would get up and walk around, and Prince Mo would follow closely. The 2 of them spent 24 hours a day together, and after 3 days, Arbor could not help but roll her eyes at him. The situation outside is so tense, as the crown prince, don't you have anything else to do? No. Mo Lien was picking at the prawn meat with his head lowered. Hearing Qiao Qiao's words, he hurriedly raised his head to glance at his wife and gave her a roguish smile. Qiao Qiao, your husband has only been by your side for 3 days and you're already tired of it. You are a little annoying, Arbor criticized inwardly. She pursed her lips. Don't you have to share some of father's burdens these days? No need. Prince Mo hurriedly dragged the stool towards his wife and wrapped his arms around her waist. Jojo, I have received father's verbal instructions. I don't have to worry about anything during this period and can just stay by your side. Actually, I am not that delicate. Arbor shook her head speechlessly. With my current body, I can go up the mountain and hunt a few tigers, wolves and leopards without any problem. However, in the middle of the night, Jojo, who was going up the mountain to hunt tigers, wolves and leopards, suddenly opened her eyes. She tried to move herself into the star region, but felt no reaction. However, her mental connection with Qiao still existed, and she heard Qiao shouting in her mental domain. Master Silver, you've really hit the jackpot. What? It seems like our star field is about to be promoted. My heavens, Master, what's going on? Qiao really didn't expect this. The last fragment hasn't been found yet, and this star domain is about to advance into a saint domain. Ha, ha 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 ha. Master Silver, your luck today is excellent. Why don't you go out and take a stroll? Who knows, you might be able to pick up a treasure or a mine or something. Ha ha ha. Arbor couldn't help but be speechless. He couldn't be bothered to continue the conversation with this crazy sapling. Meanwhile, on the other side, when Xiao Mu opened her eyes, Mo Lien, who was sleeping beside her, abruptly woke up with a start. He quickly turned his head to look at her. Xiao, what's wrong? Did you have a nightmare? Arbor shook his head with a strange expression. I think I'm about to give birth. Mo Lien's drowsiness promptly vanished, and he shot up from the bed. He hastily waved his hand to light up a row of lamps. As he hastily put on his clothes, he shouted outside, Quick, someone come quickly. Go and call the midwives and mamas over. Let the imperial physicians wait outside. Don't be nervous. Actually, I don't feel much. Arbor helplessly tugged at his sleeve. Looking at him, he was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. His expression was also very serious. She also didn't know how to persuade him to relax. This was actually very mysterious. She suddenly woke up in the middle of the night because she felt that she was about to give birth. But in reality, her feelings weren't as strong as those of a typical pregnant woman. Chapter 53-64. It was funny to say that she didn't feel much pain at all. At first, he thought that it was because he was better at enduring pain. Later, he realized that it really didn't hurt. His entire body was fine. She didn't scream in pain like other pregnant women. Sir Jojo was rather calm. When the experienced nannies and midwives rushed in, they thought that they had entered the wrong bedroom. Her Excellency the Crown Prince Consort was quietly lying there, looking at them with her large, clear eyes. She seemed to be in good spirits. The midwives went forward to check. They nodded and hurriedly asked Prince Mo to leave. Mo Lien dawdled at first, unwilling to go out. Then, the Empress, who had rushed over, yelled at her in public. She then ran out dejectedly. Arbor only felt that it was a little funny. She didn't feel anything else. She just felt that the words that her mother shouted at the Crown Prince just now sounded a little funny. Look at your pale face. If I didn't know better, I would think that you're about to give birth. Jojo is fine, but I see that you're about to faint. Don't continue to cause trouble here. Hurry and get out. The Crown Prince stumbled out in a daze. He almost knocked his head on the door frame. Wei Ziqin found it funny and distressing. She hurriedly asked people to help him to the side to rest. Unexpectedly, just as he stepped out of the bedroom door, he heard a loud and clear cry. It almost exploded the night sky. Wei Ziqin and her husband, who had rushed over worriedly, silently exchanged glances with second Aunt Ren and second uncle's family, before turning their heads to look at the brightly lit bedchamber with a somewhat dumbfounded expression. Could it be that they were hallucinating? Why did it seem like they heard a baby crying? But how could a baby be born so quickly? The Crown Prince had just been chased out of the bedroom. Before he could calm down, the sound of a baby crying came from inside. Didn't the nannies go in less than 15 minutes ago? No matter how confused the group of people outside the room was, they couldn't be more confused than the people inside the room. The midwives were all stunned. For a moment, they were a little silly. It was the Empress's two personal nannies who reacted first and scolded loudly, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and get to work." Only then did the midwives and old nannies come back to their senses and are about to go forward to check. Then, they were knocked back a few steps by a powerful halo, and fell to the ground one after another. The Empress looked over in shock. There was a faint halo floating on the baby's body, and it was slowly retracting back into the baby's skin. In less than a second, a small ball of something was curled up there, naked, and moving its limbs randomly. Arbor cut the umbilical cord and carried the restless baby over. Sir Jojo turned the baby over expressionlessly. He blinked and looked at the Empress, who was standing at the side in a daze. Mother, it's not a girl. How was this possible? Before she was born, all the signs indicated that she was a little girl who loved to eat. She especially resembled her husband. At this moment, the Empress was looking at her daughter-in-law as if she was looking at a god. When her daughter-in-law said that everything is fine and there are no problems, she was indeed not casually comforting the old mothers. Every word Jojo said was true. Looking at this natural birth, it could be said that it was smooth in just a few minutes. It really couldn't be better. Chapter 53-65. The Empress stared blankly for a long while before excitedly walking forward. Quick, quick, help the Crown Princess and the child wash their bodies. What are you all standing there for? The mamas grimaced as they supported their old waists and crawled up from the ground with lingering fear. They stammered, It's not that we old servants aren't willing. Rather, it seems like we can't get close to the Crown Princess. Arbor stroked baby Mo's bare back and handed the child over. A midwife braced herself and reached out to receive the child. It was only after she touched the child's soft body that she breathed a sigh of relief. The mamas hastily carried the child to the side and lightly wiped him down. Then, they quickly wrapped the baby in a small blanket that they had prepared beforehand. Just as they finished doing all this, His Highness the Crown Prince swiftly kicked open the palace door. Everyone saw Crown Prince Mo dashing inside and pouncing to the side of the bed, which gave everyone a fright. Outside, Wei Ziqin and the other women were also quite frightened. Everyone hastily rushed over to close the door, afraid that the cold air that poured in would hit the weak Jojo. Soon after, they caught sight of Jojo, who was sitting upright on the bed and looking at the Crown Prince expressionlessly. The little stoic's eyes were sparkling as she looked at her husband, who was drenched in sweat. She coughed lightly and said, "You might not believe it, but my child came out on his own after I laid down for less than 3 minutes. Everything went very smoothly. I didn't feel any pain." Everyone, the midwives around the child nodded repeatedly in agreement. They could all testify to this. Just now, they were about to display their remarkable abilities and do their best to help the Crown Princess deliver her child when that child came out. "Congratulations, Your Highness the Crown Prince. Congratulations, Your Highness the Crown Prince. It's a beautiful little imperial grandchild." How could Prince Mo listen to these compliments now? He felt like he had just walked through the gates of hell. His entire body was drenched in sweat, as if he had soaked in a chilly lake several times. Ever since Jojo suddenly sat up in the middle of the night and said that she was about to give birth, his mind had been in a daze and his mood had been fluctuating. He held Xiao Qiao's small hand and used a bit of strength to meet her frowning and glaring eyes. He couldn't care less about the people around them. He only cared about holding her hand and kissing it a few times. "Jojo, are you in pain? Are you in so much pain that you woke up?" The Empress simply couldn't bear to look at her retarded son. How did she give birth to such a stupid son? He didn't take what his daughter-in-law said to him to heart. Arbor's little stoic face was taut. He stared at the Crown Prince for a long time before shaking his head and saying, "You're pinching me now. My hand hurts." The Empress, Mo Lien, hugged her and wanted to cry. She reached out and pulled her into her arms, muttering to herself, "I already said that I'll exchange with you. Look, you're so tired." Arbor glanced at the Empress from the corner of her eyes. The Empress looked helpless and could only secretly exchange a look with her daughter-in-law. This Empress gave birth to a retarded child. "Hubby, to tell you the truth, I can get off the bed and run right now." Xiao Mu pushed his head away in disdain, pushing his large head that was swaying back and forth in front of her further away. Mo Lien looked at her suspiciously. "Really?" The Empress hurriedly shook her head. "No, Jojo. You have to rest well. We have to take care of our bodies. Chapter 53-66. Baby Mo, who had been ignored by everyone, suddenly wailed and started crying loudly. The Empress hurried forward and reached out to carry her grandson. She beamed as she said, "Quick, the in-laws must be waiting anxiously outside. Bring the little imperial grandson out for them to see." Several nannies smiled as they went forward to open the door. Cries of surprise could be heard from outside. Mo Lien did not even turn his head as he held Jojo's hand and said, "Jojo, lie down and sleep for a while, all right?" Arbor was actually not that sleepy right now. Instead, she was filled with joy and wanted to carry the little fellow over to take a look. She had already taken a look earlier and only saw that the child's little face was wrinkled. Now, she wanted to take a closer look at him. Mo Lien understood his wife's intentions the best. Seeing her expression, he nodded knowingly and stroked the back of her hand. "I'll go and carry him over." He got up and walked to the door. Just as he was about to step out, he heard Jolin shouting outside. "Mother, the sky is filled with dark clouds. Is there going to be a storm?" "That's right. It was fine just now. The sky was filled with stars." Xiao Sen's puzzled voice also sounded. Mo Lien's heart skipped a beat. He quickly glanced at the sky. Fuck. How is this the omen of a violent storm? It's clearly like a heavenly punishment is about to come. Damn, who was he punishing? His wife had painstakingly given birth to a child, and this wretched heaven was blind enough to want to punish her. Prince Mo's phoenix eyes narrowed dangerously. A sharp and cold glint filled the depths of his eyes. What's going on? The Empress looked astonished. Her hand that was holding the child unconsciously tightened. Mo Lien reached out to the baby. "Imperial Mother, let the people outside find a place to hide first. I'm afraid divine punishment is coming." Divine punishment. The Empress's voice instantly rose by more than half. Her face was seething with anger. Punish who? Mo Lien's hand paused. His hands passed through a layer of defense and carried the child over without hesitation. He looked down at this wrinkled imp before turning to walk towards Xiao Mu's bed. This little rascal was indeed a troublesome little fellow. He was so young, yet he was already able to set up a defensive barrier around him to block his father. Humph, humph. Could it be that this brat wanted to overturn the heavens? His cultivation was only at the 7th or 8th level of the god realm. How could he stand in front of his father? Mo Lien stopped in her tracks and her eyes widened. Wait. God realm level 7, level 8. Level 8. Level 8. Mo Lien staggered and almost fell onto the bed. Her pair of pitch-black phoenix eyes stared fixedly at the little fellow in her hands. That wasn't an illusion, was it? He did sense the aura of a deity realm cultivator on the defensive layer. Arbor saw her husband sitting by the bed in a daze with a child in his arms. For a long time, he sat there in a daze with a stiff back. She couldn't help but curiously move forward and turn her head in front of him. What's wrong with you? Mo Lien hugged the infant, who had long stopped crying and had fallen into a deep sleep at some point in time. He turned to look at his wife with a wooden expression. Xiao Xiao, you might not believe me if I tell you. Our child already opened his mystic meridians the moment he was born. Mo Lien paused, then suddenly said, Jojo's cultivation is now at the 8th level of the god realm. Arbor couldn't help but be speechless at her husband's shock. What's wrong? Mo Lien said expressionlessly, your son inherited all of your cultivation. Divine punishment was coming for this little brat. Chapter 53-67. Arbor blinked and glanced at her husband. She reached out to carry the child who was sleeping soundly in his arms and stroked the little fellow's soft cheeks. Hubby, I feel like I'm also about to advance soon, Arbor said nonchalantly and turned to look at the man who was still in a daze. After tilting her head and pondering, Jojo still decided to tell her husband very seriously, I think that the baby is sleeping right now because he's also about to advance soon. Mo Lien, no wonder that heavenly law fellow rushed here in a hurry. This mother and son pair were both evildoers, big and small. Both of them were about to advance soon. One could advance while giving birth to a baby. This was simply the biggest joke in the world. The other was even more heaven-defying and directly broke through to the God realm cultivation upon birth. Even the heavens could not tolerate such a deranged person. With baby Mo like this, what would those elderly people who had been stuck in the same realm for decades and centuries think? She definitely had to send more people to protect her cub later. Otherwise, it would really be very easy for him to be beaten to death on the streets. Hubby, what are you thinking about? Sir Jojo glanced at his silent husband in puzzlement. Something was wrong with her husband. Ever since he started holding the baby, he had been a bit dazed and hadn't completely returned to his senses even now. When he looked at her with his phoenix eyes, he was dazed and sluggish, which felt a bit comical. What's wrong with you? Arbor touched her husband's slightly icy face and hastily said, Hubby, are you very cold? Why is your forehead covered in cold sweat? The little stoic touched his forehead with heartache. Wuxia, who had been watching the show from the sidelines, was seriously about to be defeated by this adorably dumb couple. The corner of her mouth twitched helplessly. She coughed lightly and said, Lien, this child, is probably frightened by your delivery. Qiao Qiao, quickly call him a few more times and call him back. Arbor's eyes brightened, and she hugged baby Mo and snuggled into his arms. Hubby, don't be scared. Look at me, I'm completely fine. Let me tell you something. Giving birth to baby Mo didn't hurt at all. The baby came by himself in the time it took to yawn. Wuxia couldn't bear to listen anymore. On the other hand, the old nannies and midwives at the side nodded their heads in agreement. Little imperial grandson is truly an extraordinary person. It was born with a silver light, it must be a divine fetus. What silver light? This old servant saw it very clearly. It was a faint golden light. Yes, it's golden. It's a golden light. Everyone nodded, and their eyes were filled with curiosity. At the same time, the entire sky above Dragon Flame City was instantly enveloped by a layer of enchanting red light. The light radiated in all directions, making it as bright as day, illuminating the entire Dragon Flame City. Many people were startled awake from their sleep. At first, they were so scared that their faces turned pale. They thought that the Tianyun sect had sent some monsters to attack them. After all, the news of Tianyun had spread like wildfire in the past few days. All the commoners in the capital would talk about Tianyun whenever they met. Suddenly, a layer of red light appeared in the middle of the night. Wouldn't that frighten everyone? Some people simultaneously leaned against the window to take a look, and what they saw was an incredible sight. The horizon seemed to be covered by a red glow. From the direction of the imperial palace in the distance, rumbling sounds of rolling thunder could be heard. It's thunder fire. Eldest young Sir Qin stood on the eaves of a house in a plain silver robe against the wind, looking at the horizon in astonishment. Chapter 53-68. Ordinary people did not know what the dark red in the sky was. But they were very clear about it. This was the tribulation of thunder and fire that came from the heavenly punishment. Usually, they would only see it during the 5 spirits' reincarnation. At this moment, they felt that the heavenly punishment was coming rather fiercely. For some reason, they felt flustered and exasperated. They did not know if it was just their imagination. At this moment, in an ordinary farm on the outskirts of the capital, young Master Omega Kotoku received a message from a spy in the city. The tribulation of thunder and fire is heading towards the palace. It is suspected that the crown princess has given birth. Further investigation is required. Young Master Omega Katoku silently burned the message to ashes and turned to walk into the house. Just as the news was being transmitted in all directions. At this moment in the inner court of the Eastern Palace, the tribulation of thunder and fire came with a bang. When Mo Yen walked out, he discovered that everyone outside was hollering madly. Originally, they were hiding in the corners and under the eaves, watching the situation in the sky. Now, they were inexplicably chased out by the tribulation of thunder and fire. Qi Xian asked little Fatty with a confused expression, "Did you advance?" "No." Ko Hongwen was also confused as he looked at his wife. The two of them turned to look in Duanmu Qing's direction at the same time. They realized that the tribulation of thunder and fire was also fiercely chasing after Duanmu Qing. It was as if the heavens had eyes. It did not strike any of the eunuchs and palace maids who were stunned and trembling like wooden chickens. It specifically targeted cultivators who were above the divine state. The tribulation of thunder and fire seemed to be a little anxious. What was going on? Who is advancing? Little Fatty covered his head and scurried away. He could not help but roar angrily. No one is advancing. Damn it. When I was in the five spirits reincarnation, there was only one tribulation of thunder and fire. Looking at the way the heavenly Tao struck people indiscriminately, it was as if all the cultivators above the divine state stepped on its tail. It struck everyone it saw. Xiao Lin and Xiao Sen had not broken through to the divine state. This tribulation of thunder and fire from the heavenly Tao had nothing to do with them. Therefore, he walked through the crowd with a gloating expression and asked, "Is everyone okay? Do you want to hide in the house?" A bolt of lightning accompanied by flames smashed onto the left side of the turret, blasting out a few dark guards with high cultivation. Everyone was speechless. They did not know what was going on. They only felt that the heavenly Tao might have gone crazy. Otherwise, why would it suddenly come over in such a ferocious manner? As soon as Bai Wuxia stepped out of the door, she was hit by a bolt of lightning. She was so shocked that she stopped and quickly shrank back. Wei Ziqin and Madame Ren hurriedly ran over. Their faces were full of shock as they asked with concern, "Esteemed Empress, are you injured?" "No, no." Bai Wuxia shook his head and quickly dragged Princess Wushuang, who had rushed to the door, into the room. "Don't stay outside. It's safe here." When Princess Wushuang was outside, she was struck by the thunder fire and doubted life. At this moment, the sound of thunder and fire suddenly disappeared from his ears. Only then did he realize that he had barged into the crown princess's bedroom while he was running away. What happened? An Wushuang combed the messy hair on her head and wiped her small face. Which fellow is secretly advancing in rank here? Look, he has angered the heavenly Tao. Could it be that someone is undergoing the five spirits reincarnation? What reincarnation? The Empress did not know whether to laugh or cry as she pulled her and pointed behind the bed curtain. Oh, right. My sister-in-law gave birth. I have to go take a look. Chapter 53-69. Princess Wushuang yelled angrily. It's all this crazy heavenly law's fault. I don't know why it's gone crazy. How long has it been since my five spirits reincarnation? Now it suddenly wants to strike me again. It's simply doing whatever it wants. Hilarious. The corner of Wei Ziqing's mouth twitched. She coughed lightly and silently suppressed the smile on her face. Why did she want to laugh when she saw the princess's wretched appearance? Princess Wushuang found a mirror and looked at herself. She grumbled angrily, "Fuck, my face is all black. It won't scare my little nephew, right?" Bai Wuxia coughed speechlessly. Your sister-in-law and nephew probably don't have time to bother with you right now. Take a seat first, Wushuang. Oh right, it's so noisy outside. Will it disturb my sister-in-law? They must be very tired right now. Bai Wuxia rolled his eyes. They're not that tired. Madame Neyran almost couldn't hold back her laughter. She hastily coughed and said, "Princess, don't worry. Take a seat first. When the crown princess and the little royal grandson finish advancing, the lightning and fire tribulation outside should be gone." Princess Wuxia turned her face away in bewilderment. Only then did she realize that the little stoic was sitting upright behind the curtain woven from golden pistols with a child in her arms. Divine power was dense in the surroundings. White mist curled around, and half of the main hall seemed to be enveloped in a celestial realm. The mother and son were absorbing divine power here, completely unaware of what was happening outside. It was as if the entire dragon flame city was surging like a storm. All the divine power within 1,000 kilometers ran toward the eastern palace, fighting to be the first as if they were afraid they would be a step slower. The eastern palace was in a complete mess right now. All the cultivators above the god realm were collectively in trouble. No matter which corner or room you hid in, the lightning and fire of heaven and earth could strike you until you lost your temper. The most tragic were He Chen and Holy Sun Mi Yen. It was fine if they stayed in the star domain, but they had to come out to watch this bustling scene. They wanted to make fun of classmate Mo Yen, but they ended up losing their lives as well. The lightning and fire of heaven and earth ferociously hunted down the transcendent god realm cultivators and fiercely attacked them. How infuriating. After learning the truth, Mo Yen and the others were on the verge of tears. Don't you think the heavenly Tao is infuriating? It didn't dare to argue with Jojo, so it decided to argue with them instead. Who did they offend? During this period of time, the three of them didn't advance much. Beside the three of them, many of the God realm practitioners consciously stayed far away from them, afraid that they would be implicated for no reason. Originally, it was already very difficult to deal with 4 or 5 lightning fires. Crown Prince Shi Chen and the others had more work to do. It would be up to them to take on a third of the lightning fire. Princess Wuxia stood there dumbfounded for a long time. She finally found her voice and asked in confusion, "The heavenly Tao, it can't be coming from my sister-in-law and the others, right?" Bai Wuxia nodded and looked at her sympathetically. "Most likely. Only the 2 of them are advancing. No one else is advancing." Princess Wuxia stood there in a daze. After a while, she asked in a hoarse voice, then why did it strike us? Heavens! Just who was going to advance? Did the heavens have eyes? Bai Wuxia raised his hand and patted the back of her hand. Maybe the heavenly Tao's eyes are blurry and he can't see clearly for a while. Princess Wuxia stared at the Empress in front of her as if she was looking at a god. "Empress, don't you feel guilty when you say this?" Chapter 5370. Wasn't this lie a little too fake? How bad was the heavenly law's dog eyes to be able to accurately find all the cultivators above the god realm, including the hidden guards hiding in every nook and cranny of the eastern palace, and only the mother and son who had advanced was missing? Wait. The mother and son who had advanced. Princess Wuxia silently repeated it before abruptly turning her head to glare in the direction of the little imperial grandson. She asked in shock, "My little nephew is going to advance? Advance what level? He couldn't have opened his mystic meridians the moment he was born, right? Could it be that he's going to advance to a great mystic cultivator?" Bai Wuxia's mouth twitched, and he said expressionlessly, "You might not believe it, but this grandson of mine is a little gifted and blessed by the heavens. The moment he was born, he was at the same cultivation realm as his mother. The Crown Prince just said that Jojo is probably going to break through to the 10th level of the God realm. I'm afraid this grandson of mine will have to follow along." Bai Wuxia realized that after he said this proudly, Princess Wuxia's jaw seemed to be about to drop. Bai Wuxia hurriedly went up to pull her and pressed her to sit down on the stool. "Wuxia, calm down. Take a deep breath. Don't be nervous. Calm down, calm down." And Wuxia stared at Empress Bai with wide eyes. "Your Majesty, you're the one who's more agitated right now. No wonder the heavens wanted to strike people. It turned out that they wanted to strike evildoers. But why did they have to implicate so many innocent bystanders? Hearing the ghostly wails and howls outside, and Wuxia immediately jumped up from the stool. The situation was already very clear now. Sister-in-law gave birth to a peerless evildoer. When she advanced, the evildoer also advanced. Alright, the mother and son worked together to advance, but they angered the heavenly law in the end. This coward, the heavenly law, didn't dare to find trouble with the mother and son, so it fiercely retaliated against all the cultivators above the god realm in the Eastern Palace. Bah, what a coward! Who did they offend? She had never heard of such a ridiculous thing. Jojo advanced, and the heavenly law struck her friends and family. It was truly hilarious. The urgent matter at hand was to bring in those women above the god realm in to avoid the lightning fire. Who knew how long the heavenly law would go crazy? Could it be that the heavenly Tao would strike for as long as Jojo advanced? As for those men, it was naturally inconvenient for them to enter the inner palace. Then they could only continue to endure outside. Haha. Why do I feel like I'm gloating? Princess Wuxia thought as she hurriedly ran towards the door. The thunder and fire in the Eastern Palace continued for 3 days and 3 nights. All the men in the Eastern Palace who were above the divine realm were so unlucky. The great emperor, who had received a message from the empress in advance, did not dare to step into the Eastern Palace for the past 3 days. As expected, he was spared. Jojo held baby in his arms. 3 days later, he completed his advancement and opened his eyes. What she saw were pairs of expectant eyes looking at her and her son. Princess Wuxia rushed over with tears streaming down her face. She pounded the quilt and shouted in surprise and joy, "Sister-in-law! You've finally finished leveling up. If you don't complete it, I'm afraid that my third son won't be able to hold on." The White Queen's mouth twitched. The Peony Fairy smiled enchantingly and said, "Oh, the heavens have pity on us. Our Jojo has finally finished leveling up." Arbor held baby in one hand and looked confused. He led the White Queen, Princess Wuxia, Qi Xianxian, and the others to open the palace door. Chapter 53-71. At a glance, she saw the people in the courtyard. They blinked their dark eyes and turned to look in her direction. Jojo's lotus, rotten peach blossom and holy sun Mi Yen stood side by side. What handsome, elegant, and confident were all gone. What stood in front of Jojo were 3 beggars with black faces. At first glance, their entire faces were black, and their long hair was scattered messily behind their backs. They looked a little miserable and tragic. Behind them were people lying on the ground grotesquely. All of them were pounding the ground and wailing in pain. It was a pity for the group of shadow guards. They were originally handsome young men, but now they were all dressed like beggars. The little crown princess was stunned at the door for a long time. Suddenly, she pointed at them and laughed inhumanely. Ha 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 ha. The White Empress, Wei Ziqin, and the rest, who were originally silently enduring, could no longer hold it in when they heard this laughter. They also burst out laughing. Princess Wuxia and Qi Xianxian squatted on the ground laughing. Sir Jojo laughed loudly while holding the baby with one hand. With the other hand, he took out a jade image talisman from his inner world. He raised his hand and waved it in the air, silently recording the image. Mo Lian's mouth twitched. He always knew that his wife was a cheat, but he never knew that his wife could cheat to this extent. Before he could quickly walk forward, he saw a ball rolling past him. It cried bitterly and grabbed the corner of Jojo's clothes. With a face full of grief and indignation, it howled, "Jojo! You've finally finished leveling up." Qi Xianxian saw the person rolling over and immediately laughed until she fell down. She slapped her thigh and laughed hysterically. "Little fatty, how did you become like this?" "Ha ha ha, ha. Damn, little fatty had always been white and fat, like a glutinous rice dumpling. Who would have thought that after 3 days and 3 nights, after being inhumanely struck by the heavenly Tao, little Fatty would become a big black glutinous rice dumpling? Ha 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 ha. Wife, can you stop laughing? The little Fatty, Ko Hongwen, glanced resentfully at Qi Xian, who was still laughing and slapping her thigh in schadenfreude. This guy crawled up from the ground and raised his hand to brush his black hair. Dust and dirt fell from his head. His whole body looked like he had rolled in the mud, and dust flew everywhere. The background music suddenly turned into a group of women's ha 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 ha. Mo Lien quickly ran forward, her dark face full of grievance. Jojo. He had been down on his luck for the past 3 days. It was as if the heavenly Tao had gone mad. 1/3 of the lightning fire on the field was directed at him, Rotten Peach Blossom, and Mi Yen. How could there be such a scam? They were able to reach this realm because they worked hard all their lives. Why couldn't the heavenly Tao just stand by and watch? Arbor held the baby in one hand and looked at Jojo's lotus sympathetically. Everyone saw her hook her little finger at Mo Lien, and Prince Mo went over curiously. Jojo stretched out a hand and patted the crown prince's head. He laughed sympathetically. My heart really aches for you. Damn, can you not laugh if your heart aches at night? The capital's citizens, who were the center of the gossip, finally found out. The Eastern Palace's little imperial grandson was born with extraordinary talent and attracted the heavenly Tao's revenge. The lightning fire tribulation struck from the 5th to the 8th day of the new year. However, everyone knew that the little imperial grandson was fine. The ones who suffered were his father and his mother's group of unlucky relatives and friends. Pfft. Chapter 53-72. Forgive them for laughing rather unkindly. The development of the situation was inexplicably strange and ever-changing. The young royal grandson's glorious deeds had already spread to every corner on the night of the 8th day of the year. Everyone knew that the young royal grandson was truly a godly person with exceptional talent. That night, His Majesty's imperial edict was posted. In order to celebrate the birth of the young royal grandson, he issued a general amnesty and announced a series of corresponding amnesty regulations. The entire nation celebrated and the world was in an uproar. That night, Prince Mo washed up and returned to his room, finally recovering the appearance of an elegant and refined gentleman. Hubby, quickly come and look. When the little stoic saw him walk in, she hurriedly waved at him and exclaimed happily, Look, look, the baby opened his eyes. Prince Mo couldn't resist rolling his eyes. He thought, wife, I wouldn't be particularly surprised if you suddenly told me that our baby could fly. What heaven-defying things can't a divine realm level 10 infant do? Isn't it just opening his eyes? Look at how excited you are. Even though he thought this, Prince Mo still maintained the appearance of a loving father and leaned forward to glance at his son. Jojo was currently very happy and said while holding the little cub, eldest brother's family's little tiger won't be able to open his eyes for a long time. Mother said that once a child is born, he can't open his eyes and can't see too much light. Look, look, hubby, our baby can still open his eyes wide. How adorable. How can our son compare to other children? Mo Lien was a bit speechless on the inside. Once our son is born, the commotion will be so great that heavenly law will punish the lower 3 heavens with lightning and fire. How can he be the same as other families? Mo Lien glanced over and saw that this boy was currently opening his pitch-black eyes. When he saw his old father glancing over, this boy actually glanced at him somewhat absent-mindedly. Prince Mo was instantly a bit amused and simply sat down next to his wife. He repeatedly complained, Wife. Wife, wife. What are you doing? The little stoic was currently looking at her son with her head lowered. After being abruptly called several times by him, she agreed without even turning her head. Mo Lien angrily tugged at her hand. Jojo, ever since this kid was born, you haven't even looked at me properly. Arbor turned around and patted his head. After you take a shower, you'll look even better. Mo Lien felt that when his wife patted his head, it was as if she was caressing a large dog. He didn't know if it was just his imagination. Jojo, are you tired of carrying me? Let me do it. Mo Lien had just stretched out his hand when he felt a surge of energy in front of him. Without any hesitation, his hands were shaken off. It took him a lot of effort to stabilize himself and prevent himself from being shaken off the bed by his son. His handsome face stiffened. Prince Mo immediately complained, Jojo, he hit me. Arbor, hubby, be a bit more mature. Don't get angry with our child. The little stoic's small face was taut as she reprimanded him sternly. Mo Lien looked at her, both amused and exasperated. He pursed his lips and accused, Jojo, you're biased. Look at your husband. Because of this little brat, your husband was punished by the heavenly law for 3 days and 3 nights. It wasn't easy for me to recover. Yet you didn't even look at me. Arbor quickly turned around to glance at him and freed a hand to pat his cool, handsome face. Okay, you've worked hard. I'll definitely treat you well in the future, the little stoic said domineeringly. Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and he reached out to hug her. Chapter 53-73. He even hugged the whimpering baby in his arms. Arbor was amused. He raised his hand and gently pushed his forehead. Jojo's lotus, don't be angry with that old fellow heavenly Tao. Who's angry with it? Mo Lien pursed her lips. It's just a shameless old fellow. It wants to attack you, it wants to attack you and your son. It wants so much. But for whatever reason, this fellow just didn't dare to attack it. Therefore, he vented all his anger on the innocent passers-by. His pitiful shadow guards were struck by lightning and fire. They were like salted fish that didn't want to turn over. Arbor blinked. He raised his hand and heavily patted Mo Lien's thigh. He muttered, that's why I said it must have a motive. It didn't dare to strike me now, but that doesn't mean it won't strike me in the future. Mo Lien, I must guard against it. I must guard against it. Wife, your husband has a premonition. That old fellow heavenly Tao just doesn't dare to strike you. Wife, let's discuss something. What is it, hubby? Please speak. Xiao Mu inched closer to him, and their heads moved closer together. Mo Lien held back her laughter. Her phoenix eyes curved as she stared at the small face close to her. Chirp. He lowered his head and quickly kissed her. Then, he said with a serious face, Wife, the next time you advance, can you inform your husband in advance? So that your husband can be mentally prepared. Arbor blinked and tilted his head back. Husband, don't tell me you think that old fellow heavenly Tao will strike you every time I advance. As soon as she finished speaking, she saw her lotus nodding vigorously at her with a serious face. Sir Jojo couldn't help but be a little amused. He hugged Lotus' arm and laughed. It won't, husband. Don't think too much. This time, it's just a coincidence. Maybe they're here for our children. Think about it. The child's innate talent is so miraculous. It's impossible not to strike him. As he spoke, Arbor suddenly raised his hand and stuffed the baby into Mo Lien's hands. This time, the little thing didn't push his father away. Perhaps it was because his father didn't take the initiative to hug him, but rather, his mother stuffed him into his arms. Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh. He originally wanted to refute his wife's nonsense. How could there be such an incident? He felt that every time in the future, it would be so strange. He was unlucky that his wife had advanced in rank. He reckoned that he would not be able to avoid such a natural disaster. Suddenly, she felt that the child's blanket was a little warm. She raised her hand to touch it and looked at Jojo in confusion. The little stoic pinched her nose and crawled into the bed. I think the baby pooped. Go clean him up. Mo Lian's hand that was holding the child stiffened. The little stoic looked at him with her round and bright eyes. She directly pulled up the blanket and laid down. She was possessed by a drama queen. Jojo's lotus, Jojo can only help you up to this point. Mother said that although my delivery went smoothly and I'm different from normal people, I still need to rest a lot. For example, I have to wait on the baby all day long. You'll have to take care of the baby's poo. As she spoke, she looked at him very seriously. Your baby is a little hedgehog. Even the palace maids and eunuchs won't get close to him. But you can't let him sleep in a pile of dung. So husband, I'll be relying on you. The little stoic extended a fist from inside the blanket and made a gesture of her husband's hard work. Chapter 53-74. Mo Lien hugged the baby and looked at her, both amused and exasperated. He felt like he had been tricked by his wife again. He lowered his head to look at the baby. Just as Jojo had said, the baby's eyes were wide open, and he was currently expressionlessly glaring at him. The crown prince poked his son's soft cheek lightly with his finger. The baby suddenly spat out a bubble and smacked his lips before continuing to glare at him. Jojo, this little imp is glaring at me again, the crown prince complained as he reached out to remove the baby's blanket. He picked up a dirty cotton cloth that was wrapped around the baby's butt in disdain. Sir Jojo simply couldn't bear to look at this man's clumsy actions and closed his eyes. Where do you plan to take that thing? She couldn't resist covering her face and shouting when she saw him quickly walk toward the window. Crown Prince Mo raised his hand and tossed that filthy diaper away. Arbor couldn't help but exclaim, supper is outside the window. Mo Lien, sorry, brother. If I threw it on your head, it's because you didn't find a good place to hide. Arbor tossed aside the blanket and hastily ran down the bed. He saw that he had thrown the baby on the round table and was currently bending over to grab a clean diaper from the clothes rack next to him before messing around with the baby. The little stoic pursed her lips and directly raised her hand to smack her husband's head on his head. Hubby, are you stupid? You didn't even wash the baby and directly changed his diaper. Wife. Prince Mo looked at her aggrievedly. The little stoic expressionlessly glared at him and directed the crown prince from the side to have him pick up the baby and get some water to clean his small body. Later, she had him put the baby down, change into a clean diaper, and wrap the blanket properly. After this fool followed Her Majesty the Queen's instructions and finished messing around. The young crown prince consort hugged her fragrant son and said with a yawn, husband, I'm sleepy. Find someone to clean up here. I'm going to sleep first. The crown prince looked a little aggrieved as he watched his wife hug the baby and go to sleep. For a moment, he felt as if the sky was falling. By the time he instructed the palace maids to clean up the room, he returned to the bed and took a look. The mother and son were already asleep. The miserable crown prince could only sneak onto the bed. He was afraid of waking up the mother and son, so he dawdled for a while before lying down. The only good thing about the little rascal was that he didn't cry or make a fuss that night. He didn't wake up in the middle of the night to torment his mother. When the crown prince got up early in the morning, he saw that the mother and son were still sleeping soundly. He didn't dare to disturb them and only secretly planted a kiss on his wife's cheek. Early in the morning, the great emperor sent a verbal order to have a meeting in the study. When she reached the entrance of the Eastern Palace, she saw the empress's carriage stop. When the crown prince saw his mother, he hurriedly walked forward and warmly greeted his mother. Mother, why are you here so early? The empress said expressionlessly, oh, I'm not looking for you. I'm here to see my daughter-in-law and grandson. If you have something to do, then go do it. There's no need to greet me here. The crown prince felt a little hurt and looked at the empress plaintively. Why did he feel that the moment Mo Bao was born, his status in the family seemed to have suddenly plummeted rapidly? The two guards following behind him silently lowered their heads and snickered. Their shoulders couldn't help but tremble slightly. His Highness the Crown Prince was really a little unlucky and miserable recently. Not to mention that he took the blame for his son and endured the heavenly punishment for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, he had just said a sentence to the Empress, and the Empress disliked him for blocking the way. She felt that he was in the way and was affecting her from seeing her grandson. Chapter 53-75. Crown Prince Mo glanced resentfully at Her Excellency Mother before pitifully leaving. Queen Bai looked back at him with confusion. Her son looked so pitiful. Those who didn't know would think that someone had mistreated the Crown Prince. An old nanny beside Queen Bai held her arm and couldn't help but laugh. Queen, you should pay attention to His Highness. After all, His Highness blocked the thunder and fire tribulation for the little prince for 3 days and 3 nights. Bai Wuxia couldn't help but laugh when she thought of this. Everyone on the streets was talking about this. They even praised the Crown Prince's fatherly heart for blocking the thunder and fire tribulation for the little prince for 3 days and 3 nights without hesitation. Puff God knows what choice the Crown Prince had. The thunder and fire tribulation didn't dare to hit Jojo or her little grandson. It vented all its anger on the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince was so unlucky. He didn't want to be like this. Master Silver, Master Guangguang strode over the tall threshold with his short legs. His eyes shone with a watery light. He swayed his small body and ran over to the bed. Then, he jumped onto the bed and started to climb up and roll on it. Master Silver, Master Silver, Master Silver. After kicking himself 3 times, Sir Guangguang finally managed to kick himself onto the bed. When he looked up, he saw Qiao Mu gazing at him expressionlessly. Woman, I'm here to see my little Master Silver. Arbor didn't say anything. She raised her hand and knocked on his bald head. Call me Auntie. Lord Guangguang covered his head and pursed his lips. He rolled to the front of the blanket and called out in surprise, Woman Auntie. Seeing that Arbor was going to knock his big head again, Master Guangguang had no choice but to submit to evil. He immediately changed his words. Auntie, look. My little Master Silver is so pretty. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. The little baby's face was still wrinkled. Perhaps Master Guangguang's eyesight wasn't good. She didn't know where he looked pretty. However, Baby Mo's eyes were black, like hers. Indeed, it was quite beautiful. Guangguang, who do you think his eyes resemble? Just like you. Lord Guangguang hurriedly said flatteringly. Arbor was very satisfied. He nodded and said seriously, not bad. His eyes look so much like mine. As expected of my son, Jojo was overjoyed. Women. Lord Guangguang blurted out but quickly corrected himself. Auntie, can I play with Master Silver for a while? No. Little Monkey's voice was full of disapproval. Guangguang turned his head and saw the little monkey and the bald little monk lying on the side of the bed. At this moment, they were looking at him. What right do you have to say no? This is my little master. Without saying a word, the little monkey raised his hand and slapped Lord Guangguang's little butt heavily. You have no manners and don't know the rules. Do you know who I am? Guangguang looked at her in confusion and stammered, aren't you a little monkey? Who are you to call me little monkey? The little monkey pulled a long face and slapped Guangguang's little butt angrily again. Lord Guangguang's face flushed red. He was so angry that his hair was about to stand up. You what? The little monkey threw away his finger that was pointing around. You have to call me Auntie in the future. What? Lord Guangguang was so angry that he almost fainted. He worked overtime too late today and didn't have much energy. He should sleep first. Tuesday to Saturday. Chapter 53-76. Woman. Lord Guangguang tugged on Arbor's clothes and shook it forcefully. Aren't you going to control her? My hair is about to stand on end because of her anger. After saying that, the little monk climbed to his side and sat on the bed obediently. He raised his hand and touched Lord Guangguang's hairless head. You don't have hair. Arbor couldn't hold back the amusement in his heart, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. The little monkey nodded and hurriedly added, I think you won't be able to grow hair in this lifetime, so don't have extravagant hopes. The little monk patted Lord Guangguang's head comfortingly. Don't be afraid, there are benefits to not having hair. You don't have to wash your hair if you don't have hair, just wipe it with a rag at any time. Tai Chi, who was passing tea to Arbor, couldn't help but burst into laughter when she heard that. These three little radishes couldn't help but bicker when they were together. It was really too fun to watch. The little monkey snorted and proudly lifted his little chin, asking in all seriousness, Hang, what do you call this little sister? Lord Guangguang glanced at Arbor and silently swallowed the word woman back. He said with an unclear and unwilling expression, Call me aunt. The little monkey's eyes lit up and he said with a smile, See, you call my little sister aunt, what does this mean? Doesn't this mean that in terms of seniority, I am your little aunt? Lord Guangguang almost fainted from his fallacious reasoning. He glared at the little monkey and shouted angrily, You little brat, you actually dared to take advantage of Lord Guangguang. This fellow was so angry that his mouth couldn't even move properly. He stuttered for a long time before he finished his sentence. The little monkey's eyes curved as he glanced at him. So what if I took advantage of you? Who asked you to be so stupid? Besides, don't my words make sense? It's always like this. You call my little sister aunt, then aren't you my little nephew? Guangguang, now you know what you should call me, right? Guangguang was so angry that he didn't want to bother with her, so he simply turned his face to look at his little master. With one look, he discovered that his little master was awake. Two big, black eyes were staring at him at this moment. Her small, diamond-shaped mouth was slightly tilted up, and her porcelain-white face was glowing. She looked extremely beautiful. The glutinous rice balls were pink and fluffy. This was too much fun. Lord Guangguang called out, Little dumpling, and Arbor froze for a moment. His memory seemed to have been taken back to the heavenly snow region. Thinking back to that time, a certain scammer had also called her Little Dumpling. She then looked at her son, who was a little thing with a round head. It was indeed quite suitable to call him Little Dumpling. So she nodded and said, All right, I'll call him Little Dumpling from now on. Lord Guangguang seemed very happy. Who would have thought that the name he had given to his master would be adopted by Sir Jojo? Thinking about it this way, he felt that he was quite talented. Master Guangguang glanced at Arbor with a smile. Auntie, can't I play with little master for a while? Arbor looked over and couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. She saw that her son, who had a pair of big, black grape-like eyes just now, had long fallen asleep. This little fellow's eyes were closed, and he was sleeping there quietly. The few of them looked at each other, not knowing when this fellow had fallen asleep. But the child had just been born, and her mother had reminded her before that the child would definitely be more sleepy in the early stages, so she didn't have to be nervous and so on. Chapter 53-77. She reached out to poke the child's soft forehead and shook her head at Guangguang. Look, Xiao Tuanzi is asleep now. Let him sleep for a while. In the past 2 days, he had been advancing and going through tribulations. He was still so young. It was quite torturous. Since Xiao Tuanzi was asleep now, let him have a good sleep. The little guy could probably consolidate his realm in his sleep. Xiao Mu felt that she was indulging in the wildest of fantasies, so she hastily shook her head and cast aside this unrealistic thought. Now that she had a child, she could understand how her mother felt when she had her. She didn't want her child to be rich or talented. She only wanted her child to be safe and sound. Guangguang didn't insist on disturbing Xiao Tuanzi. She nodded and said sensibly, "All right then. Let the little master have a good rest. Only with a good rest can he grow up quickly. In the future, Master Guangguang will definitely accompany the little master to gain experience." Arbor's lips curved slightly. She was in a good mood. In the future, she would also bring the child out to gain experience. Whether it was the Phoenix Forest in the southernmost part, the ice sky snow region in the northernmost part, or the vast and boundless sea of forgetfulness. The family of three would have fun wherever they went. Ever since Qingzhou was taken down by Tianyun, the situation in the three states became more and more tense. The great emperor gathered the crown prince and his men and held several meetings to make arrangements. However, after the fall of Qingzhou, several small countries around it were in a precarious situation. They frequently sent distress signals to Shenzhou. The crown prince was so busy that his feet barely touched the ground. He didn't even come back for lunch. Occasionally, he would come back, but every time he came and went in a hurry. Arbor felt sorry for him. Fortunately, she heard that the second young master of the Xie family had also returned to the capital. With this person helping the crown prince, it could reduce his burden. Recently, the great emperor looked at the crown prince with a gaze that said, "I'm old. It's time to hand over this burden to you." She felt that in the near future, this unreliable father was very likely to give up his responsibilities to the crown prince. Arbor gently put down the cup in her hand and patted her son who was still sleeping soundly under the blanket. Suddenly, he heard footsteps outside the door. Eunuch Chen jogged in and hurriedly bowed. Crown Princess, Princess Consort Zheng entered the palace to pay respects to Her Majesty the Empress. She then made a detour to the Eastern Palace, saying that she wanted to personally congratulate the Crown Princess. The little Crown Princess glanced at the door indifferently. She could vaguely see a few figures moving around. Since she was entering the palace to pay respects to the Empress, it meant that this Princess Consort Zheng had received her mother's permission to enter the palace today. Since that was the case, Jojo naturally could not disregard his mother. She nodded and said indifferently, "Please come in." Princess Consort Zheng followed Eunuch Chen in with a cautious expression. The moment she entered, she bowed towards the young crown princess. "Greetings to the crown princess." His attitude was respectful, and he did not dare to slight her in the slightest. The little stoic nodded and had someone come forward to help her up. Her gaze landed on Su Shitao behind her, and she raised her brows in surprise. Although she didn't have a gossipy heart, she had heard a lot of gossip from Caichi and the others. She was rather familiar with the gossipy family affairs of the Prince Zheng's estate. She had always heard that Princess Consort Zheng did not get along with this Miss Su Shitao. Wasn't it a bit abnormal for her to bring her into the palace today? Chapter 5378. Arbor couldn't help but take a few more glances at Su Shitao. Princess Tao, who was usually very aggressive, was actually very obedient today. Not only did she come forward with Princess Consort Zheng and respectfully bow to the young crown princess, but she even raised her head and smiled at Arbor with a gentle and well-mannered expression. Arbor's hand trembled and she lost her grip on the teacup. The hot tea spilled out just like that. The tea stained Su Shitao's skirt. If it were any other time, this Princess Tao would have jumped up in anger and scolded her while pointing at her. It was even very likely that she would have punched her directly. However, it was very strange today. Not only did this Princess Tao not blame her, but she even asked for her forgiveness in fear and trepidation. She kept saying that it was because of her clumsy legs that she didn't dodge in time, which led to such a disaster. Xiao Mu was simply stupefied, and she hastily sized up Su Shitao. She pointed at her very seriously and turned to ask Princess Consort Zheng, what's wrong with her? She had changed her mind so quickly that she was at a loss for what to do. Could it be that Prince Cheng had taught this Princess Tao a lesson in private? That was probably not very likely. From what she saw, Prince Cheng doted on his only sister very much. He probably wouldn't lay a finger on her. Princess Consort Zheng's gaze was also somewhat secretive. She followed the young crown princess's gaze and sized up Su Shitao. Princess Consort Zheng felt that this younger sister of hers seemed to have taken the wrong medicine today. Her tone was unbelievably gentle. However, she had never interacted with this person, so she couldn't be bothered to care about what tricks this younger sister of hers was up to. If Prince Cheng hadn't forced her to bring Su Shitao into the palace to broaden her horizons, she definitely wouldn't have brought such an uncertain factor into the palace to pay her respects. At this thought, Princess Consort Zheng turned to the young crown princess and said with a smile, "Crown Princess, congratulations. I heard that the Emperor's little grandson encountered the heavenly fire lightning tribulation when he was born. He must have outstanding talent, surpassing ordinary people." "That's right, Crown Princess. Congratulations." Su Shitao also said. He quickly took 2 steps forward and approached the bed. She couldn't help but lift the thin and soft brocade blanket that covered the little dumpling. Not only is the young prince different from ordinary people, but he is also different from ordinary people. In my opinion, the crown princess is also very different from ordinary people. Su Shitao said with a smile, otherwise, how could the crown princess be able to get up and walk normally a few days after the child was born? Princess Consort Zheng's eyes flickered slightly, but she did not stop Su Shitao from continuing. "I've heard people say that the little prince is quite an anomaly. In 1 day, he would be able to open his eyes, in 2 days he would be able to call for his mother, and in 3 days he would be able to run. Crown Princess, is it true?" "Tao, don't talk nonsense." Princess Consort Zheng symbolically reprimanded Su Shitao, allowing Su Shitao to blabber on endlessly. The young crown princess pressed down on Su Shitao's action of lifting the blanket, and her expression instantly darkened. Now that he was close, a pungent fragrance from Su Shitao's body assailed his nostrils, causing Arbor to frown uncontrollably. Who said that this Su Shitao's personality changed? It didn't change at all. It was just that his original threatening gestures had been disguised as today's acrimony. Su Shitao wasn't alarmed when the young crown princess pressed down on his hand. He merely glanced indifferently at the little stoic. Looking at her tense little face, he smiled faintly and leaned closer. Chapter 53-79. Crown Princess, did you know? I'm not spouting nonsense. Right now, the entire capital is secretly spreading the rumor that the young imperial grandson is a demon fetus. Think about it, a baby that can open his eyes in 1 day, call out for his mother in 2 days, and run on the ground in 3 days. If he's not a demon fetus, then what is he? You're spouting nonsense. Kai Chi was so anxious that her eyes were red. She couldn't help but berate angrily, how can our young imperial grandson be so resourceful? It's not what you're saying at all. The young imperial grandson couldn't be any more normal. For the past few days, he had been sleeping like an ordinary child. He had been sleeping the entire time. When he opened his eyes, he would grumble about eating and drinking. After eating, he would sleep. It was just that simple. Why hadn't she heard the rumor that there was a demon fetus spreading around the capital? It must be this Su Shitao who used these words to anger their crown princess. Kai Chi was both anxious and furious. She hurriedly turned to the young crown princess and said, "Crown Princess, don't listen to her nonsense. This servant sees that her words are evasive and untruthful. She must be lying to you." The young crown princess nodded. She pulled back her hand and slapped the approaching Su Shitao. She sneered in a low voice, "Is this crown princess such a gullible person in your eyes?" Su Shitao cried out in alarm. She flipped over and sat on the ground. She hastily crawled a few steps back and retreated several feet away from the arbor. Su Shitao suppressed a trace of fury in her eyes. If she hadn't done her utmost to control her anger, she would have exploded long ago. She was simply too envious of this crown princess. Actually, as soon as she entered the Eastern Palace, Su Shitao's eyes were dazzled by the magnificent decorations and jealousy. Not to mention, once she entered the palace, she had to lower herself to be a concubine everywhere. Now, she even had to follow Princess Consort Zheng and pay respects to this young crown prince consort. This made her feel uncomfortable all over and extremely sullen all over. The demon fetus that she had blurted out wasn't something that she had made up without any evidence. Indeed, there was a strange rumor spreading in the imperial capital. She wasn't the one who spread it. She had only said it out of the goodness of her heart for the crown princess to hear. Who would have thought that she would be so unreasonable and give her such a heavy slap in the face? This damned Xiao Mu. Su Shitao secretly gritted her teeth and took a deep breath, trying her best to suppress her anger. Arbor glared at her and immediately became alert. There must be something fishy going on. According to what she knew about Princess Tao, she was not a patient person. There was definitely something wrong with her current appearance. Arbor reached out and took the child into his arms. With a solemn expression, he took the child's pulse and looked coldly at Su Shitao. Men. The little crown princess said coldly, capture her and search her. Su Shitao's gaze contracted, and she shouted repeatedly, what are you doing? Crown princess, you can't treat me like this without distinguishing right from wrong just because of your status. The little stoic had never been someone who liked to waste words with others. Since she ordered people to capture her, they would be captured. Why was there so much nonsense? With a look, several palace servants around them hastily rushed forward and restrained the struggling Su Shitao in a flurry of moves. Su Shitao flew into a rage and shouted in an abnormally shrill voice, what are you doing? Crown princess. What do you want to search? Noisy, the little crown princess complained in a low voice with a cold expression. Wait. Chapter 5380. Kai Chi immediately took out a dirty rag and stuffed it into Su Shitao's mouth. The latter widened her eyes in disbelief and glared hatefully at Kai Chi, her entire face flushed red. It was as if she was suffering an enormous grievance. Tears welled up in Su Shitao's eyes and didn't fall for a long time. At the young crown princess's command, those junior royal maids from the Eastern Palace immediately swarmed forward and pinned Su Shitao down. They didn't show any mercy to the fairer sex and lifted her clothes to search her body. They searched her from head to toe, inside and out, and placed all the bottles and jars they found in front of the young crown princess. The little stoic small face was cold as she reached out to take one of the porcelain bottles. She pressed the bottle's opening and shook it vigorously. Black centipede. She expressionlessly spat out these 3 words. She then took another porcelain bottle and shook it, coldly saying, poisonous scorpion. 7 pollen. Su Shitao's pupils contracted and dilated as he watched this expressionless young crown princess identify the items inside the bottles one by one. A bad premonition flitted through his heart. You prepared more than a dozen types of poisonous insects, poisonous substances, and poisonous powders and carried them all on you in order to wait for an opportunity to use these things to harm my son. The little stoic's lips tugged into an icy curve. Kai Chi couldn't help but shudder slightly when she saw this. When the crown princess said this, her eyes coldly glared at Su Shitao. The iciness and callousness in the depths of her eyes engulfed everything, as if she could tear Su Shitao to shreds in the next instant. Su Shitao widened her eyes in horror and spat out the dirty rag in her mouth with all her might. She feigned ignorance and asked, how can you malign me like this? What proof do you have that I brought these things to harm the young imperial grandson? Can't I use them for self-defense? The fragrance on your body. Arbor gazed at her coldly. There's a big problem. There, what problem? Arbor sent a look to Kai Chi and Kai Xiu. The two immediately understood and walked up apathetically, pressing Su Shitao onto the gold-threaded wooden table next to them. Ah! Su Shitao let out a short scream, and then his eyes widened in fear and anger. With an expression of disbelief, he stared at the open bottle in Kai Chi's hand. The powder in the bottle was poured into her mouth. The fine powder was choked by the wind. Su Shitao couldn't help but cough and spit out a small mouthful of powder. Arbor threw a pill to Kai Chi and Kai Xiu, hinting them to take it as soon as possible. Then, she looked coldly at Su Shitao. Her eyes were as cold as ice in the abyss, without the slightest hint of warmth. Su Shitao. Arbor coldly said to her, "Today, even if the Daluo Immortal is here, no one will be able to save your life." Only now did Princess Consort Zheng return to her senses. She hurriedly took 2 steps forward and said, Crown Princess, Crown Princess. What's going on? Tao has always been disrespectful to the Crown Princess, so it's only right for you to punish her. But, can you not implicate her family? Su Shitao's anger was stifled in her chest. It was very unbearable to hold it in. Sister-in-law, you actually said that about me? You didn't plead for mercy for me and find a way out for me, but you actually kicked me to death. Princess Consort Zheng looked as if she expected better from Su Shitao and coldly glanced at her. Chapter 53-81 5, 1133-inch Tao, don't blame me for being merciless. I've already reminded you many times. His Highness also told you not to do stupid things again, but did you listen to my advice? Princess Consort Zheng sighed and said, I followed His Highness's orders today to bring you into the palace. I didn't expect that something like this would happen. This consort is also about to be too ashamed to see people. How could you do such a muddle-headed thing, Tao? Princess Consort Zheng sighed with a long sigh. However, Arbor glanced at her coldly. Princess Consort Zheng, do you know what these dozen types of poisonous insects and powder are for? Princess Consort Zheng couldn't help but be taken aback. Then, she hurriedly shook her head in fear and trepidation. Crown Princess, don't worry. I don't know anything about these poisonous insects and powder that Tao plays with. The young Crown Princess smiled coldly at her. Go call Fairy Yellow He over. Princess Consort, Da Qing, just sit here for a while. I want to find a more professional person to properly explain to Princess Consort. Princess Consort Zheng's palms were clammy with cold sweat. For some reason, she inwardly felt that it seemed like the situation was taking a sharp turn for the worse, inexplicably developing in a terrifying direction. At this time, Su Shitao, who had choked on a mouthful of poisonous powder, was glaring hatefully at Arbor, as if she could glare her to death. Fairy Yellow He arrived very quickly. Within a few minutes, she rushed to the young Crown Princess's bedchamber with several capable assistants. When she heard that the young Crown Princess had been attacked with poisonous insects and powder, Yellow He ran in with a cold expression, shouting along the way, Who dares to attack Jojo? It's you. Yellow He's eyes abruptly glared at Su Shitao, who was huddled by the door, sizing her up. Yellow He, take a look at the things on the table. Fairy Yellow He nodded and quickly ran forward. One by one, she picked them up and carefully studied them. Her expression slowly turned grave. She looked back at Arbor hesitantly. Arbor was sitting on the edge of the bed with her son in her arms. When she saw Huang He turn his head and glance at her, she nodded at him. Huang He immediately understood. He stood beside the table and skillfully mixed the contents of the bottles and jars on the table. In less than half a cup of tea's time, Fairy Huang He had carefully mixed the poison powder of the poisonous insects into a black medicinal liquid. The medicinal liquid swayed back and forth in a transparent container. It looked like a ball of flowing ink, extremely dark. Fairy Yellow Crane held the bottle of medicinal liquid and walked step by step towards the pale-faced Princess Consort Zheng and Su Shitao. Princess Consort Zheng's voice trembled as she asked, What is this? Does Princess Consort not know? Arbor looked at Princess Consort Zheng and said coldly, This is the source of this world's mass production of corpse puppets. Commonly known as the basic mutated medicinal liquid. It's not as powerful as the mutated pill, but if you frequently take this basic mutated medicinal liquid, the transformation of the body is also extraordinary. Princess Consort Zheng stood there dumbstruck. She then shook her head repeatedly and muttered to herself in a daze, Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. Was the Crown Princess joking? How could the miss of the Prince Qing estate carry the poisonous insects and powder used to make the basic mutated medicinal liquid with her? All of this must have been planted by the young Crown Princess, right? The Prince Qing estate definitely could not take the blame for this. Too sleepy, I'm falling asleep. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.